Okay, I'd like to call this February 13th meeting of the Concord Select Board to order, and we will now move to executive session to discuss two different topics. One is because of litigation and that these matters
Yeah.
could compromise our position. So,
Okay, move to enter an executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation regarding Estabrook Road, Town of Concord versus Rasmussen et al., and regarding 615 Lowell Road, Archstone Builders LLC versus Concord Historic District Commission. As the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the town.
and I so do declare.
Yes,
Maybe we need a
we're
second.
gonna take a,
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Okay, Mr. Dane, who's
Aye.
under the table there.
I am, but I'm still voting.
All right, Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
And we're back online, I believe. So I would like to resume our open session of the Select Board on February 13th. Thanks to those that are attending via Zoom for your patience during our executive session. And so our first matter of business is to approve signs for Estabrook Road. So in light of the recent court decision, we need to update the postings that are available there. And we have two sign facsimiles, which I can share on the Zoom. And we will review them and take a vote. Okay, so hopefully now on the screen you can see the facsimile of the first sign. So there are two signs that are proposed. The first one establishes the status of the way as well as the status, the fundamental right and rule of access for the public. The second sign is usage rules for the Estabrook Road discontinued portion. So these are identical to the rules that have already been in place for some time. So there aren't any adjustments to those. In fact, word for word, they are identical. In the other sign, the first sign, the main change is there we go, is to establish that this Estabrook Road is a private way with a subject to a right of public access, that the members of the public must proceed at their own risk, that the way that portion of Estabrook Road has been discontinued as a public way. That discontinuance order was from 1932, still in place. The town of Concord has no obligation, therefore, to maintain the road beyond the sign, but the public has a right to access the road to the Carlisle town line. That public access is limited to Estabrook Road, and please be respectful of neighbors and stay on the road. So that is the first sign, and that establishes, again, the conditions for the road, and the second identifies the access rules for users of the road. So,
Do we need a motion to accept these signs?
yes,
Okay.
there's no further discussion or debate among members.
Motion to accept both signs as shown by Matt on the screen.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thanks very much. And so now we'll move to the second item on our agenda, which is the consent agenda.
Okay, move to approve the
I-
consent agenda.
I think we need to pull off January 30th. Remember, we have some corrections to that. Shannon, are the corrected ones on?
They're not included in the packet.
Okay,
I was
so-
thinking that the motion could just include the suggested edit.
Is there a small edit?
No, it's a serious.
Okay, so then let's
Pull that off.
remove them.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a substantial move forward
Right.
on our minutes.
Right, and I had sent Shannon a few typos. Gail Dowd's name was misspelled, things like that, but I don't think, those are all, Shannon's correcting them, so we can move ahead with those.
Okay, so can I get a motion on the consent
Okay.
agenda then?
Move to approve the consent agenda with the
ex-
exception of the January 30th, 2023 minutes.
Second? All right, all in favor? Aye. Okay, on to the town manager's report.
Thank you and good evening. There is a full report in your packet, but I was hoping to use my few minutes this evening to address the emergency family shelter. And I'll just read from a statement that was prepared. The Department of Housing and Community Development contracted with the Best Western at 740 Elm Street to lease all 105 rooms for the purpose of a temporary emergency housing. This service will start on March 1st and will be managed by Making Opportunities Count, or MOC. MOC is a well-established nonprofit based in Fitchburg, devoted to breaking the cycles of poverty in Massachusetts. DHCD's rush to set up this program has understandably led to questions and concerns from our community.
Bring the recorder on it, honey.
All those that are on Zoom, please mute your lines. Thank you.
I hope to address these concerns in this memo with the information we have to this date. On January 20th, 2023, DHCD notified town officials of its plan to establish an emergency shelter at the Best Western. At the time of the notification, there had been no previous consultation or coordination with the town regarding this shelter. Town administration and staff first heard directly from DHCD representatives in a Zoom meeting on January 31st. At that meeting, DHCD representatives explained the need to return to hotel and motel temporary placements, which had largely been phased out to address the critical volume of Massachusetts families in need of emergency housing assistance. The DHCD Emergency Shelter Program has exceeded capacity. Standalone facilities dispersed throughout the state will help to address capacity issues and provide rapid response capabilities for families in transition. This is a problem directly affecting members of our community, with Concord families, among others, located at the temporary shelter facility at Devon's, awaiting more permanent housing, and currently are sleeping in a barrack setting on cots. To address this critical statewide need, Governor Healy requested an additional $65 million in aid to support the emergency shelter, and an additional $20 million for school aid to assist with the costs associated with additional enrollment. These aid funds will go to providing 1,100 additional emergency shelter beds. We have put together a frequently asked question document that is on the website. I'm not going to go through all of that. We are updating that on a regular basis as we have some additional information available. There are two other items related to the shelter that I wanted to address. The first has to do with zoning, and the second has to do with the building code. So there are no limitations in the town zoning bylaw on the length of stays allowed at hotels or motels. As we recently learned through social media posts, we have members of our own community living at the Best Western on a long-term basis. Extended stays are allowed under the bylaw, so there's no permit process that is required, or no specific public review process, no site plan review process. We have, as a courtesy, however, asked DHCD to respond to a code review. And we've asked them to have a qualified architect review the building under the International Building Code with respect to Group R1 and R2 requirements. And the reason we have asked that is because the building code review in existence for this property deals with Group R1, which is a review based on occupancy of 30 days or less. Group R2 addresses occupancy greater than 30 days. And while we don't necessarily have any reason to believe that it doesn't meet the requirements of Group R2, there just has never been a review to that extent because it wasn't constructed with that purpose in mind. So we have asked for that review. We asked for that on January 31st.
Please mute your lines online. Okay.
And we will be following up with them later this week to inquire as to the status of that code review. We've also asked as a courtesy for DHCD to provide us a statement addressing minimum standards of habitation. So here we're looking to better understand how the people who will be residing there temporarily will have their needs addressed in terms of meals, laundry, transportation, et cetera. And again, DHCD acknowledged that request, and we will be following up later this week to better understand that. The last item I wanted to address is our own residents who had been living at the Best Western, have been living at the Best Western. This was news to us, and we found out, I think, as the community did through social media posts. When we did find this out, we advised DHCD, and it was news to them as well. We had really no way of knowing that people were living there, and DHCD was very responsive and reached out to each of those parties to offer alternatives, either to stay at the Best Western in Concord or other, to make other accommodations for them. We believe at this point in time that most, but not all, have made arrangements to DHCD. And we would encourage anybody who feels that they are having any difficulty in making progress with DHCD to reach out to my office. And we will be happy to assist them.
Okay.
I had one question.
Question for the town
about the
manager.
information that we had, and that is there was a mention of having staff available 24/7 from DHCD. I wonder what the extent of that staffing is and whether they mean in-person staffing or potentially remote staffing or access to staff. I think that would be an important factor in the effectiveness of running this program.
Sure, and I can address that. So DHCD has contracted with MOC making, now I've already forgotten, making opportunities to be an on-site service provider 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they will be there. They will be the point of contact for any of the residents staying there. And as a part of that contract, MOC will be responsible for case management, for coordinating service needs of anybody that is staying there, and they will be the point of contact for any town staff for that facility if any questions arise.
But it's still not clear whether they mean on-site, meaning physical presence of a staff member at all times, or whether that means just availability.
Yeah, so we have been told physical presence at all times. And while the state is contracting all 105 rooms, they are using some of those for offices, for their support staff that will be on site.
Okay, other questions for
I
the
have a
town manager?
question. So Carrie, the R2, the code review that you were talking about, if I got that correctly, what could be the result of that review? How could that play out?
So I really would not be comfortable getting into that. I think, you know, our building commissioner is quite capable of reviewing what the state comes back with, and we could provide an update.
Okay.
But I, you know, honestly, I would be uncomfortable getting into that right now without him here to help back me up. It's not my area of expertise.
So you're saying that there's no zoning requirements that would disqualify an extended stay?
That's correct.
So the only thing we're not really clear about would be this code.
The code
The code review.
requirement.
And presumably if that had code, they had code issues, that those code issues could be addressed, such as by fixing certain things like fire alarms or fire suppression or other issues that might not meet the standard for R2.
Yes, I don't think that's a good example. There is a fire alarm and fire suppression system. I understand that you're using that as an example, but I wouldn't want anybody to think that there is any deficiency in that system.
Okay, other questions for town manager? All right, so just my own remarks as chair. I just wanted to start by saying that the board in our executive session, our second executive session this evening, voted to defend the appeal of against Archstone Builders LLC with the Concord Historic Districts Commission. So we will be entering a defense in that appeal. Secondly, that there were a number of letters, a very large number of letters that we received on that issue, as well as Hanscom's expansion and other issues in town. For example, the family shelter. It's been a busy week. While we were able to publish a number of those letters that were received before our Friday deadline for receiving public correspondence, others we either did not include because they addressed a topic of pending litigation, an executive session matter for us, or were late. And I realized that some of the letters, they were very high quality letters, and they were all forwarded to the board members. Many, I think we all did our best to read them. But we do need to keep our policy that is published on our website for public correspondence for a couple different reasons. First of all, it's really only fair to the board and the public. Our packet this week was 221 pages as it was. You know, we get republications of the packet. It creates confusion, potential confusion, and also just different levels of understanding of what issues have been addressed. And then secondly, it's just that our packet really is to inform the board, and it is a service that we do, you know, try to provide of informing the public of the letters, but you know, we're not a publishing platform as such. You know, the packet is, it's also probably not the world's best publishing platform, but in terms of it doesn't get a lot of circulation. But we do very much listen to those letters, and we don't want to create a situation which we have to arbitrate. Oh, well, this one's late, but it's, you know, worthy or something. We just really need to have an established policy that we follow. So,
Right, so our policy is that if they come in by like Thursday or something.
no, it's Friday at noon, I believe, right?
Okay, Friday.
Friday at noon.
Right, got it.
So, and then letters that meet the terms of the policy as published can be published in the subsequent meeting packet. Okay? Yes.
So if I may, I'd like to go back to the town manager's report.
Okay.
and If I may.
Late breaking.
Yeah, late breaking. And thank the town manager for posting the information on the emergency shelter in the way that she has, and also keeping it updated with the evolving information, which changes almost daily, because there is a high interest in this, and this was something that came rather suddenly for, in terms of our awareness of it, and so there wasn't a lot of time, but I think your office responded pretty quickly, and it's helpful to the public, so thank you.
Okay.
The Western manager was trying to speak on Zoom, and I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
public comment would
Yep,
be.
fine.
Okay, so now at this time, I'd like to move to our 6:50 PM item, which is the public hearing for the grant of location request from Comcast of Massachusetts. Do we have someone representing Comcast available?
We do have,
All right,
go ahead, Justin.
okay. Go ahead, identify
Well,
yourself.
we have to
and-
move into the public hearing.
Oh, we have to open the public
Okay,
hearing.
move-
Sorry.
Move to open the public hearing for grant of location petitions from Comcast.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we can proceed.
Hi, good evening. It's Greg Franks from Comcast. Nice to be with you this evening. I have two petitions. The first one is for 695 Monument Street. It is an aerial placement from utility pole number 38 to number 58 on Monument Street. And it's to provide service at 695 Monument Street. I know that my colleagues at Comcast have met with engineering, and as usual, we familiar with the engineering's standards and fully prepared to comply with those.
So, Mr. Franks, I mean, in our packet, we had, I believe it was 5 petitions.
I think it's 4.
So we had one Plainfield Road to Old Road to 9 Acre Corner, one Pond Street to a pole 29 on Lawsbrook Road, one that's a utility pole 1 at Court Lane to utility pole 3 at Court Lane, then pole 63 on Barrett's Mill to Pond Street, and then the one you were talking about, Monument Street to 58 Monument Street. So are we aligned as to those or not?
I wish I had those documents in front of me. I have Court Street, and I have this Monument Street one. Is that one of the ones?
They're
on your
both in
list?
our packet, those
Okay.
are, but there also is Plainfield Road and, Barrett's Mill and Lawsbrook.
Okay, well, I suggest we only do the 2 that Mr. Franks
we'll
is
come back.
familiar with.
Yeah. Okay.
That's great. I just looking in my file here. I think those are old, but I could be wrong. But anyway, if you have any questions about the 696 Monument
So
Street
I'd
petition,
like to ask our Public Works. Yes, so can we get Justin to speak up on this?
Yeah, so for the 2 of them, we with these sort of things, because it doesn't involve a lot of work inside the right of way itself, we reach out to CMLP to provide comments, and then we also combine their comments with some of our standard ones. So those are the preferred conditions or the recommended conditions from us that you'll see that were attached.
Okay. And I did have a question or two, but I'm not sure they relate to the ones that we're now looking at, because the one I thought had activity that took place near the Rotary, and I was interested in what kind of special provisions need to be made for, the safety of the installation and also traffic for work done at the Rotary. And then I was also interested, as it wasn't clear to me, as new services being added, whether the old cable will be taken away. I do see that there's a condition that says that anything that's deemed obsolete be taken away, but that doesn't necessarily mean that anything is going to be. And let me just state, it's just sort of more of an aesthetic concern that this is all visible, and we just seem to be at more and more wires overhead. It would be nice if we're upgrading a wire to be able to take away the old wire as we're doing it.
My understanding is this is sort of a closed network. These things that I come to you for are usually some sort of special service that the customer needs. And it is overlashed, so you won't really see anything extra. There'll be perhaps a new drop from the line to the building. It depends on whether it's underground or not, but people generally won't notice it.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Okay, yes, Linda?
Well, I am just curious about why there's the disconnect between the number that are in the packet and the two that Mr. Franks is bringing before us. Justin, can you respond to that?
So we received those, and we'd like to kind of lump them all together when we prepare them. So those ones were a little older, and we kind of lumped them with these newer ones when we reviewed it. So I know we received them because I have the emails that like basically this was a request. But I'm not sure if Comcast received this packet or not.
Okay.
I don't personally have it. I mean, I have a petition from Plainfield Road from May. Is that one? I'm pretty sure I appeared on that. And
Yeah, I think it is the same one. I did know.
Yeah, that's the same one. So some of these are from May.
Okay.
Is there any problem with our considering all 5 of them?
Well, I have a problem with it. I feel like if the
applicant's not seeking it.
yeah, if the applicant's not got the paperwork in front of him, I'm only going to vote for the 2 that he's presenting tonight.
Well, because again, I think that we use standard conditions in all of them, but nonetheless, it's just to not be able to have the applicant review the conditions memo seems a little out of the ordinary. And I think that also we can quickly cure this at our next meeting.
Exactly.
So,
Well, can I suggest that when we put them on a future agenda, that we do what some other boards do, is we schedule them all for the same time, so that if we just deal with one, we don't have to wait 10 minutes or 15 minutes until the next one on the agenda.
Right.
well, and that's what
That's
we've
what we
done
did.
tonight.
That's what we did.
All under one time?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we've done. Okay, so I think at this point, I'd like to ask any members of the public that would like to have a comment or question on these applications to come forward, either in the room or on Zoom. You can use the raise hand function on Zoom. I am not seeing any. Okay, so I'd like us to
Move to close the public hearing.
Okay,
Second.
Is it possible for you to close the public hearing on the 2 applications?
just on the 2 applications.
Because we've advertised all 5.
Okay, so move to
Continue.
close the public hearing for Court Lane and Monument Street, and to continue the public hearing for Plainfield Road to Ornack, Pond Street to Lawsbrook Road, and Barrett's Mill Road to Pond Street.
To a date certain, and we should ask the applicant.
Well, I assume that
he's-
the next meeting, if these are older applications, right?
Are we going to have time at that?
So it would
meeting?
be, well, that's right. It would have to be our March 3rd meeting, I believe it is. March 6th. March 6th. Okay? And we'll do them at, how about 6:50 PM, March 6th?
I don't think we've heard from.
I think
You haven't heard from me on Court Lane, but yeah, I'm available on that date.
Okay,
But
we'll
we'll-
go for March 6th at 6:50. All right. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now the next motion.
Okay, move to approve the following grant of location petitions from Comcast of Massachusetts to install new coaxial cable, utility pole number 1 Court Lane to utility pole number 3 Court Lane, and utility pole 38 Monument Street to utility pole 58 Monument Street, both of which have to, subject to the conditions outlined by the Concord Public Works Engineering Department.
Do I have a second for that?
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Franks. We'll see you again March 6th.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now we're going to move to our next item, which is the Comcast, actually another Comcast item, contract renewal presentation. So I think we have Sue Buskey of the Buskey Group
Sue is on Zoom.
on Zoom, and we have Carlin Reed, the chair of the PEG Access Advisory Committee here. Okay. And I also see Jason Bolger, our Chief Technology Officer, present. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carlin Reed, PEG Access Advisory Committee Chair. I'd like to note that I have all of my committee members in the room as well as on Zoom. So for that reason, I'd like to call my meeting to order since we're doing a joint committee meeting, if that's okay.
You intend to deliberate?
I don't know, but just in case something comes up, we were advised to do a joint noticing of this meeting.
Okay.
So
Go right ahead.
the PEG Access Advisory Committee is also in order. And in the room, we have, as far as committee members, Vince Carlson, Corey Atkins, and Cynthia Rainey is online as well.
Present.
And then also, thank you, Cynthia. Also online, we have Sue Buskey, who is our consultant for the cable access franchise renewal process. And I just also want to note, we have a Council on Aging liaison, Christina Hendricks, who oftentimes attends as well. Okay, at this point, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Sue. She has a slide deck that's also contained in the packet. She'll go through the slides and talk to us briefly about it. And then I have a few minutes wrap up. And then Jason Bolger is here also to correct me in case I make any misstatements or if he wishes to add additional things. Before we
Okay.
begin, Jason, is there anything else that you want to add?
I just want to thank the committee for all their work. They've done a tremendous amount of work, and Sue has also lended a lot of guidance. So I just want to thank everyone.
Okay.
Okay, Sue, take it away.
Sue, we're not hearing you if you are online.
See her. Sue, we're still not hearing you.
Yeah, you're muted as far as we can see online.
Okay, is it better now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, the old line, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
And can you see the slide deck?
Yes.
We can, very clearly.
Oh, perfect, all right. Well, thank you all very much. I've had the pleasure of working with the Access Committee now for, several months. And what I'd like to do is to kind of go over the process that the town is involved in. Comcast has been operating under a 10-year franchise that's due to expire in April 2024. Now, remember, if that 10-year franchise is due to expire in 2024, that means it was originally effective in 2014. And with the amount of time normally it takes for these processes, the negotiations probably were going on several years before that. That said, that means that this document is dated. When you think about how much change has occurred in the last 10 or 11 years with regard to technology and media changes, it's time we go through a renewal process because Comcast, number one, has a 10-year franchise, and number two, has requested that their franchise be renewed. There are many community benefits contained in the existing license agreement. And as we go through franchise renewal or license renewal, it's important to recognize that we need to look at this as a forward-looking endeavor. In other words, whatever happens with renewal of this agreement needs to satisfy the needs and interests of this community from a communications perspective, not only today or in 2024, but also in 2034. So public input is therefore very critical in the franchise renewal process. So let me, first of all, give you a quick overview of what a franchise is or a license. There, in most places in the country, we call them franchises. In Massachusetts, we call them license. You see me and hear me use that term interchangeably. A franchise agreement is simply a land use agreement. Comcast, as you guys have just been discussing, has to place its wires, either the utility poles or in the underground conduit. That is public property. The local government has a responsibility for giving access to public property. And therefore, the relationship between a cable operator and a local government is a landlord-tenant relationship. The cable operator is the tenant on the public property. The local government is responsibility for caring for and giving access to that public property. Now, typically, when you have a landlord-tenant relationship, the tenant must pay rent. So part of what is negotiated in a franchise renewal process is what is the rent that the tenant, i.e. Comcast, will be paying for the use of the public property between 2024 and 2034. Now that rent comes in the form of franchise fees. It comes in the form of community channels, or what we call PAG, public educational and government access channels, and support channel. It comes in the form of the ability to have quality customer service. All of these things are part of the franchise renewal process. Local governments must abide by federal and state law when they proceed through the franchise renewal process. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that in a few moments. The public input piece is critical because there are two key aspects of license renewal. One is a look to the future, which I've mentioned already. The other key part is a look to the past. In other words, has the incumbent operator, in this case Comcast, have they complied with the terms and conditions of the existing license agreement? So when we go through license or franchise renewal, we're looking at determining what future services are going to be received by the community, but also whether the company has actually complied with this current agreement. So renewal is really important to Comcast. Now, I think you all probably know that Comcast provides three different services. They provide TV service, they provide internet service, and they provide telephone service or telephony. The license agreement process is technically about the cable. But as you all know, I suspect, the signal for the internet and the telephone travels on the same wire that we've been talking about that the cable TV service travels. So let's look at a conservative estimate of what Comcast revenue opportunities are by getting this 10-year franchise agreement renewed. I've done a very simple math formula. There are roughly 4,400 subscribers or homes that subscribe to Comcast in Concord. Now, if we estimate $120 a month, which only includes the cable piece, it doesn't include the internet and the telephone piece because we can't include that under federal law. Okay. So you take the 4,400 times $120 times 12 months times 10 years, and suddenly you look at the value of this license agreement to Comcast in getting it renewed, over $63 million. However, that assumes no rate increase. And that does not also include the internet and telephony revenue that our opportunities will come to the cable operator by simply having the right to have their wires in the right of way to provide cable service. Therefore, Comcast will likely be able to leverage about 3 times more, or close to $200 million, if you take the $63,000 times 3, if it has its license renewed. So as you can see, the future value of this franchise agreement, or this license agreement, to getting it renewed to Comcast is a great deal of money. Now, in the existing license agreement, there are a few things that are part of that rent for the use of the right of way. Now, what I'm going to share with you is just the stuff in the existing franchise. Number one, there are 3 channels that have been set aside for public education and government access programming, or community programming, as we call it. There is a franchise fee, which is 5% of gross annual revenues, 4.8% of which is earmarked for the support of your public education, government access channels, and ongoing support for the franchise. There is a paid capital grant, which over the 10 years from 2014 to 2024 was $353,000 plus for the 10-year franchise. And there's also a dedicated fiber link from where the aggregation or origination point for the signals for your PAG access channels is, which is at the high school to Comcast head end. These are all part of that rent package that Comcast currently must provide and has been required to provide over the last 10 years for the use of the right of way. So this is kind of what's at stake, because those things don't automatically carry forward to a new license agreement. Technically, we start from scratch. We have to take a look at what are our needs and interests for the next 10 years. We need to take a look at, are the things that we've been receiving adequate, or maybe they have not been adequate for the current 10 years. So we need to look at the renewal process and look at the opportunities. Now, obviously, the opportunities are to make sure that there's state-of-the-art communication services that are going to be available through the term of the license agreement. And that would be through typically 2034, the typical 10-year license agreement is entered into. Quality customer service. When you call, does the cable operator respond quickly and deal with your problem? Ensuring support for public education and government access channels and community media. And that can include things like, for instance, having your community channels in high definition rather than standard definition, which is what they're in right now. Having the descriptions of the programs that are running on your community channels be included in what we call the EPG, or the electronic programming guide, so that when you go to look at one of your channels and it says it's a town select board meeting of such and such a date, there's a sentence or two that describes what that meeting is about, just as there is a sentence or two about other channels that you might look at the electronic program guide to determine what you wish to view. In other words, assuring that Comcast is paying adequate rent for their commercial use of the public's property. So what I want to do now is to take you through the process that the town must go through franchise renewal. It is a 36-month process as required by federal and state law. It starts 6 months or between 30 and 36 months before the franchise is due to expire. Comcast properly submitted their request for renewal at that time. Their report requires a performance review of the cable operator, a community needs assessment. Now, it's important to look at those two things, and I'm going to zero in on those in a little bit greater depth in a few moments. Those two things are very critical, because the information that's gathered, this is really part, these two bullets are the due diligence part of the process on the town, from the town's perspective. What you're able to negotiate in a new license agreement must be based on, number one, findings of the past performance review, and two, what the community sees as things that they would like to see as communication services in the future from the cable operator. Now, two quick things, just so everybody's clear. Two things that are not on the table is rates are completely deregulated at number one, and number two, a local government cannot tell a cable operator, you will carry this channel, but you will not carry that channel. Okay, those are two things we cannot touch, but everything else pretty much, quality of service, etc., access channels, those are all things that we can negotiate for in the license renewal process. Once you've gone through those two bullets 2 and 3, then you're prepared to sit down and do our informal negotiations. If the town, reaches impasse, then there's another much more complicated formal process, which I won't get into tonight. So the past performance review activities include taking a look, and what we'll be doing, we'll create a table, and that table will lay out exactly what is in the existing license agreement that Comcast has been obligated to do for the last 10 years. So it will be sort of section citation, a summary of that particular item, and then yes, no, and no's. That will then come back to the town, and you'll be able to see that there have been areas where the company has not complied with the terms and conditions of the license agreement. We're starting that process right now. Also, in our public input process that I'll talk about in a moment, which is going to be a whole series of hearings, focus group meetings, etc. We'll be getting information from people who live in Concord about their how they feel about Comcast and the quality of their service and what they'd like to see in the future. All of those things, the compliance table, the public input gathered through the needs assessment, that gets put together into the report that determines whether the company is compliant. And at that point, the town would, if there's non-compliance, would notice company of compliance to cure. Now, the next and final piece I'm going to talk about that we'll be dealing with and assisting the town with is the public input process, or what we call the needs assessment process. And there's a whole series of activities there in the bullets in front of you. And let me just quickly go through those. Number one, there are 3 community focus groups that are going to be occurring on May 10th and 11th. There are going to be 2 Zoom coffee meetings. I believe the dates of those are May 17th and May 31st. There's going to be an online survey, and that survey will open on May 10th, the date of the first of the focus groups, and close 1 month later on June 9th. Also, we will be undertaking an evaluation of the current paid access equipment facilities and services. I've already sent inventory requests and certain other information requests to the folks at Minuteman Media Network so that we can get an understanding of what is in place right now. What is the condition of the equipment, how much it's been used, etc. And that will help us then determine, are our needs being met now, let alone what do we need for the future? All of that information will come together into a report that will provide specific findings and recommendations as to how the town should proceed in its negotiations with Comcast toward a new license agreement. So that's a really quick overview of the license renewal process, some of the high points of what's involved, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Ms. Reed.
Thank you. Can I just make one comment on this? I would request that when people are making a presentation to us in the future, if they provide us with PowerPoint slides in advance, that we not then take up our time by reading the PowerPoints to us verbatim, which actually in most of the what I heard was difficult to understand anyway, but it just takes up a lot of time giving us information that we already had, and it takes up everybody else's time just listening to a verbatim reading of the PowerPoint slides.
Thanks, Mr. Dane.
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Dane. I'm happy to answer any of the questions you have about the process at any time. Let me know, please. That is very briefly a highlight of what we're doing. We serve at the pleasure of the Select Board. I want to emphasize once again that we're going to be seeking public input on May 10th, 2:30 to 4:00 p.m. at the Concord Main Library, May 11th, 10:30 a.m. to 12 o'clock here in the Select Board room, and also May 11th, 7 to 8:30 p.m. at the Harvey Wheeler Center in the Clock Tower room. We'll be doing an online survey May 10th through June 9th, getting input on Comcast performance and the future needs assessment for the town of Concord. With that, are there any
Yes.
other questions?
Ms. Hartman, and then I sense that.
I have 2 questions. One is, I heard that we can't do anything about the rates, but can we do anything about the franchise fee? Can we
About the-
negotiate the franchise fee?
About the franchise fee?
Yes.
Yes, up to a cap of 5%, which is the
Which is
maximum.
what we're at now.
We're actually at 4.8%. There
Okay.
is some room, perhaps. We
How
can talk
much
about
is that a year now to us?
How much do we
400,000,
make?
350,
Roughly
400,000.
about $350,000, $400,000 a year at this
Okay.
point.
Okay, and then my second question is, actually, I know I just asked 2 questions. So my third question is, if we're talking about some of the concessions that we'd like to get from them, like better customer service, like maybe tonight's earlier conversation would have been more productive if we had better customer service. But I guess what I'm saying is if they don't comply, what leverage do we have, really?
Some of this may be going into the negotiation phase that we should be discussing in a less public forum. But the leverage that we have is they want to provide service over our public rights of way.
I understand, but if we somehow reach an impasse, is there a competitor out there that we would go to and negotiate, or is this, we just depending upon the good faith of the people in the conversation?
This is for cable TV service. And there are, at this point, my understanding is there is nobody else who wants to provide cable TV service. There are alternatives for video services, however. So what we do is we continue to negotiate until we reach a conclusion. And I'm fairly certain we will be able to reach a
But
conclusion.
in Sue's slide, it said if we get to an impasse, we do an RFP process.
That is unusual.
Yeah.
That's when you absolutely cannot reach an agreement. And we've not begun our negotiations
Right.
at this point.
Right.
So is there some timeline on the negotiation period? Because I recall last time when this came up, it went on for a while.
We have, our franchise agreement expires in April of 2024. We will most likely have a needs assessment report ready for discussion by, I believe it's August of this year. And that's really what, about the time we'll start the negotiations with Comcast. If for some reason we're not able to reach an agreement after April 21 of 2024, what we do is we request an extension of that agreement from the State Department of Telecommunications and Cable. And in the past, they've been willing to grant extensions in 3 to 6 month blocks at a time, which is what we would do if we were not able to. But it is my intent that we're able to reach an agreement of some sort, if at all possible, before expiration of the agreement.
And will we be cooperating with Carlisle? Excuse me?
I'm sorry, say
Will
again?
we be cooperating with Carlisle on this, or?
Carlisle has their own franchise agreement. They are at this point running somewhat parallel, but they started their agreement negotiations at least a year and a half ago. There's some coordination, but not complete coordination, because we do share the same head end.
Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Mr.
Thank
Dane.
you.
Following up on Mary's question, I think you answered the part of her question about what leverage we had about competing providers. And you say essentially there are none. Is that right?
I'm being very careful in the phrasing. There are no other cable TV providers, not video services.
I understand,
But
but
cable TV providers at this time. This is a non-exclusive franchise agreement, which means if someone wanted to come in, they could.
in
It's
other
a
words, we could
non-exclusive.
grant more than one franchise?
Absolutely,
Parallel
absolutely,
to
yes, we
them.
could.
But isn't there some issue about the ownership of the poles that has been a problem with that in the past? Since I think it isn't, don't we share the ownership of most of the poles with Verizon?
I believe so. Jason, there's more,
So that in fact, we really don't have control over other providers or the ability to allow other providers to come in.
that's not quite
We
true.
can cover, we control work done in the public way. I mean, that's what we were
Yeah,
just
but-
doing.
And there is a process for pole attachments to be done,
Yeah.
that if necessary, that we can have it work through the State Department of Telecommunications and Cable. So there are procedures in place where additional companies can attach onto the poles, even if the poles are owned by Comcast and by Verizon.
Okay, well, the
So they
question, I
could if
guess
they wanted to.
I think actually though, the question I wanted to follow up on is that once we grant the franchise, what remedies do we have if the promised services are not provided?
Those are contained within the terms of the franchise agreement,
And,
such as their customer service provisions of.
and what if they don't adhere
And if
to
they
those?
don't, well, then there are procedures on how we can enforce that, and we can ask for.
Who can enforce it?
Well, I guess
we are
what would be
franchise
the current
agreements.
agreement? What do we do under the current agreement?
Under the current agreement, we haven't received a whole lot of complaints, but if we did, we would talk with Comcast directly and say, what are you doing about this particular situation? Can you
But I
help
mean,
us?
contractually, are there?
Live streaming.
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Heyer, could you mute, please? Thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That the, under the current agreement, what are the criteria or the means of escalation that
Okay.
are provided?
I don't have that memorized, I'm sorry, but they're contained within the last 4 or 5 pages of the franchise agreement. I'm sure I can get that answer to you. if
Okay,
you
because
wish.
I guess
But there
we're
are
just
provisions for
curious,
that.
you know, what our scope of authority is here.
Because
If
we're
we
making
find-
a commitment for 10 years, and if the service deteriorates for any reason, we would not want to be locked into a franchise agreement that gave us no meaningful remedy.
Okay, I see that our consultant would like to
Sue,
speak.
can you help me with this one?
Yeah, I don't recall specifically what's in the current license agreement, but I can tell you this, that local governments in many places, including in Massachusetts, around the country where I work, include a procedure where if there's been identification of a breach of the franchise or violation of the franchise agreement, customer service or whatever it might be, you have a procedure, a notice and opportunity to cure procedure. And if the company doesn't cure, then there are in many cases financial penalties for not complying with the terms and conditions that the particular item that is identified as non-compliance.
Okay,
The degree and the thoroughness of those sections of franchises, I find frankly very tremendously impressive.
okay. Yes, Terry.
Couple of quick comments. I'm the liaison, and I'm very impressed. It was hard to hear, Sue, but the PEG Access Committee and Sue have been working hard, and I just wanted to add that one of the things that Sue is going to do this time is look at what Comcast has done in the previous contract. Have they complied? And that's really great because that gives us some leverage about what have they complied with. Hopefully all of it, but she's going to actually see. And then the second thing is to answer Mary's question, besides the franchise agreement fee, there's a large amount of capital equipment that can be funded. And there are needs that Jason and his staff have talked about at MMN. And so we can get a lot of that funded through this negotiation.
Is that the 353,000?
That's what it was this last time,
But
right?
we could negotiate that higher?
Yes,
Or we could negotiate it as part of the whatever.
we're going to negotiate it, yes.
Okay, but that was over 10 years, so that's not,
Right. Actually, it's my impression that a lot of the money from this last contract was only recently spent, so that we have a lot of fresh equipment that has been purchased.
Is that right, Jason?
I'd say a lot, but yes, there's an amount. And that 353, it's not really per year. Usually it is lump sum.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily all 300,000. It's also not 30,000 a year. So it's something, usually there's like tranches. So maybe it would be 100,000 up front and then another 150,000 a few years later.
Yeah, that was my impression, is that some tranche of that must have opened
Right.
up because there was a lot of equipment purchased.
Yeah.
So what kind of input are you going to be taking about customer service under the current contract?
Basically, anything we can get by online, through the online service, online survey, as well as in-person, people who show up, people who write emails to our email address, which is paac@concordmat.gov. The time period that we have set is essentially, well, we could take it now for that matter, but May 10th through the 9th is when we'll be having an actual survey with a series of questions to be filled out as well.
Okay.
To all residents or to just Comcast subscribers?
It would be to all residents, because the purpose of the franchise agreement is to allow all residents of Concord to have access to cable TV service.
Okay. I also wanted to ask, what are you looking for from the select board?
Are we on the right track? Can we go ahead and have these public forums?
Yeah.
I don't need a vote. I just want to make sure you know what we're doing and that it's okay that we can go forward.
But you don't expect, I mean, I guess, would we review the final agreement? I'm just trying to understand.
You'll
what is
sign the
role?
final agreement.
Right.
So
Okay.
when we have a needs assessment report, our consultant will come back and we'll have another discussion about here's what she's found, here's the recommendations, and here's what we can start negotiating for.
And that would be roughly August.
Yeah, but I'm guessing that's about when we're going to be starting. Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments from the board? Okay, then, thank you very much for
Thank you.
your presentation tonight, and the members of the advisory committee for your attendance.
Thank you. And the PEG Access Advisory Committee is now adjourned.
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now moving to Jason Boulder, who will give us a review of our wireless communications in town, a subject also of a lot of recent discussion.
No, I can do it. I was going to do it.
I also see Chris Carmody listed as a presenter. Okay,
And I'll do my best not to read the slides verbatim.
all right.
That would be good.
So I've been working on this project for several months now in coordination with the town manager's office and other staff. And I've been asked to come here today to give the select board an update on where this project is and the process and enhancing the cellular coverage in Concord. We know this has been a long-standing issue and that it's a high priority of the board to see some movement. So that's why I'm here today. So we wanted to frame this as not if, but how. We know that there's a problem. We know that we're going to address it. How are we going to get there? There are 4 primary cellular carriers today, Dish, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon. We're going to talk a lot about Verizon today because there are noticeable gaps in Verizon coverage, but I did want to mention the 4 main carriers. Concord has a long history of protecting its historical character. And I think that, as you'll see in a little bit later in the presentation, there have been some obstacles into citing certain things because of those protections that exist in the bylaw today. So the carriers have come to the table in Concord. They are interested in certain sites. They have approached the town. They have responded to RFPs, but those actions have not always resulted in successful construction of some facility. So the question is why, and how do we keep these conversations moving, and how do we actually get movement on this project? And I just mentioned here that we do need support. We need support from the board, support from the ZBA, the Historic District Commission, others, and the public. So we're trying to tie all those things together here today. And what are the motivations? Public safety is number one. We have impact statements that are in your packet tonight. There have been many people who've come to us with actual real world examples of emergencies that they've experienced, not been able to contact a loved one, children who can't contact their parents and vice versa, doctors and surgeons who work at Emerson who can't get paged when they need to respond to an emergency surgery. These are real effects that we feel today, not just the public, but also our own first responders in coordinating issues or incidents that they respond to. They rely on cellular communications, and that has failed them in the past. So public safety is number one. Number two, economic impact. We have tons of businesses who could do more than they are doing today. We also have businesses who may not consider relocating to Concord because of the reputation and the inability for them to access the cellular networks. The town is a business itself, and the town has difficulties and struggles with its own operations because of the cellular coverage as well. Public Works, CMLP, public safety, even broadband, we rely on getting data to our our employees so they can serve the town, and that is a struggle. And then quality of life. People expect today to be able to make phone calls and access the internet and their mobile devices. Well, I'll also mention the 250th celebration. I'll mention the tourism aspect in Concord. We have a lot of people who come here, and it's known as a dead zone in the area. So the select board, as one of its priority goals for 2022-2023, was to review the policies that we have and see what we can do to address these concerns. So I mentioned we don't need the maps, but we have them. So I just wanted to point out a couple maps here. We use both analysis that we do based on facility height and power and the terrain of the town, but we also have real world data. We don't want to rely on just those models. We want to actually look at the calls and the difficulty with the calls. So the map on your left up here is crowdsourced data that is from people who run applications on their phone that pings a tower and also reports back what the signal level is. Anything in dark green or red is a bad signal. Anything in bright green is a good signal. This is Verizon in the area. It shows the two facilities, one in Lincoln, one in Emerson. There's a third up on the map, up the wastewater treatment plant. But there's a large swath of the Concord Center here that is either dark green or red, and it has difficulty. On the map on the right, you'll see the green area is areas of coverage, and you'll see the three towers. One of them in the top is kind of being hidden in the zoom view, but the Concord Center is virtually an island in terms of coverage. So actually, real quick, before I come to this slide, I wanted to just mention that historically, towers were thought to be located in a community and send out signal. They could be very far away. But what you have to understand is that the device that's getting the cellular coverage needs to be able to talk to the tower as well. You can't have a device that you can hold in your hand and put up to your head, safely transmit data hundreds or thousands of miles. So the distance to the tower is dependent on how much data it's sending and how far it is and what frequency it's using. So the model, when we wrote our bylaw, relied on mostly voice networks that traveled long distances and carried low amounts of data. Today, video streaming and all the data networks that we have require higher frequencies to transmit more data and can only travel shorter distances, which means we need more facilities to provide the same level of coverage. I'm not going to read any of these here today, but it's just a sample of some of the impact statements that people have submitted. Everybody is frustrated with the lack of coverage, especially downtown, especially with Verizon. And I would refer to the packet for more impact statements on that. because public safety is our number one motivation for seeing this project through, we have to do a comprehensive townwide analysis. We can't just say the center is bad, let's fix that, because we don't know where a bicyclist is going to go off the road and need to make a phone call to get help. We don't know where that next emergency is going to be. So we need to take a comprehensive townwide analysis and look at this problem. However, doing that is going to slow things down and take a long time. And so we need action today. So what we're proposing is this two-pronged approach where we focus on the Concord Center and the CCHS, the high school, because we know that those are areas of really poor coverage. But also, let's look at every carrier in every part of the town so that we can come to the table with those carriers and address all those issues so that we feel like our residents can make that emergency call when they need it. And regarding that townwide analysis, this is work that's being conducted by internal staff in IT, GIS, the town manager's office, and also the land use divisions. We have multiple RF consultants. These are people that the town hires to protect the town's interests and to make sure that we're getting accurate data, that the carrier's data is checked and verified, and also so that we can ensure that we're taking a comprehensive look at this. You know, remember, the carriers want to help the carriers. They want to provide services to their customers. The town cares about the entire town's interests, and we don't have a particular carrier that we're beholden to. We care about the entire town. We also use the crowdsourced data that shows real world data as to what calls succeed and which calls fail. And we're also have requested the dropped call list from carriers. This is something that gives you a complete list of all the calls that were not able to be completed by a carrier. It's something that they have, but they don't like to release because it can be used by their competition to say, oh, you don't cover this area, but we do. So we will disclose, sign an NDA if we need to, but to get that data so we can at least quantify how bad the problem is in certain areas. Before I move on, I just also want to mention that the town manager has also asked us to take a look at providing Wi-Fi in the downtown area as a potential way to help the coverage, also during large events and also for the business community down there. So we're looking at that too.
This would be town internet Wi-Fi?
Exactly. Yeah. So why is Concord unique? Well, I mentioned the historical character. Also the bylaw. The bylaw, section 7.8, which is the personal wireless communications bylaw, and the overlay district, which is a map that specifies where certain facilities can be located, is, according to third-party consultants, very restrictive. It limits the area where these facilities can be sited to a very small portion of town, and it's not in the areas of town where we have high concentrations of people. So this means that every time a carrier is interested in a site, it would be ideal because of the topography, because of the height, because of the structure, they run into problems with this district and also the bylaw. It is unique for municipalities to have to do this much work. It's not common that technology departments or town managers' offices need to work so hard to get this for their residents. This has been an uphill battle for a long period of time, but it's something that not every community has to deal with. There are some unique things in Concord that have created the situation. In 2003, the town hired Broadcast Signal Lab, a third-party consultant, to report as to why it was having so many problems getting improved cellular coverage in Concord. And the report could be read as if it were written today because it encapsulates all of the issues that we have. They talk about the overlay district, they talk about the bylaw, they talk about comparing to other municipalities that have either half or greater than or less than half of the buffer requirements in our bylaw. So these problems are not new, but they continue today. So this is the map here of the overlay district. This was the area back when they created the bylaw that they thought would be good locations for potential cellular infrastructure. You can see a large swath of the Route 2 area is covered. It was thought that people in their cars would need to make a phone call driving through Concord. There wasn't a lot of thought to the residents themselves or the people working and the businesses in Concord. There were a couple parcels added to this map over time, but largely it's a pretty small area of town. The next map I'm going to show you is if you look at all of the buffers that are listed in the bylaw itself that have to do with historic buildings, schools, residences, all of them with 1,000-foot buffer saying that facilities should not be located here. You can see any area in white are the only areas left that are covered. And then you have to still overlay this map on top of it to show the number of parcels that are actually allowable by the wireless bylaw. So let's jump into one of the potential locations for infrastructure that would make a difference today. Verizon has approached the Concord Carlisle School District and the Superintendent's Office to see if they could potentially site something on this property. This is in very early stages of the conversation. There is an agreement to allow engineering work to happen, but there is no actual proposal. I want to stress that. And there's been no decision made. This is just to say what could go where and what would it look like and what would it be so that it can be discussed. And this is really a school-led project. It would be on school land, but we have reached out, both myself and Chris Carmody from the town manager's office, to Lori and to Peter Kelly, her IT director, to get the conversation moving to see what the town can do to help. The town also uses the same Verizon land consultant for the other potential locations that could help. And so we've been in contact with that individual to see if we can move this process along to at least get to a point where we understand what would work on this location. And I will mention that because it's proximity to Route 2, this location would be in that narrow swath of land that's approved in the bylaw. So it would have one fewer hurdle to overcome. It wouldn't require that an exemption from the district. And the last thing I'll mention is that if we do get something here, even if it were a tower at the highest height that's allowable in our bylaw, it will not cover the downtown Concord area. It will cover up parts of it, but because of the topography, the trees, the coverage, it will not cover that area. So this can't be a sole solution. So let's take a look at some options that will improve the downtown cellular coverage. There are 4 listed here, and the first one I want to start with is one that's not actually on this list, and that is Kai's Road. We anticipated some people saying, what about Kai's Road? It's actually in that crosshatch at the top, on the top left, and it's been used as a potential site for a long time, or discussed as a potential site. It actually was one of the sites in an RFP issued twice by the town for a potential site. A few things are a barrier for this site. First of all, the view shed will be that it can be seen by the National Historic Park. And even though that's not going to stop the project, it is going to add 1 to 2 year delay for the permitting of that location because it will be seen from the historic park. We've conducted 2 balloon tests at that location, and both of them at around 100 feet have been visible at the Old North Bridge. So that's going to be one hurdle. Another hurdle is that anything sited there, the preference would be that it would be stealthed. So there's been discussion that there was a historic smokestack on 141 Kai's Road. Perhaps another smokestack could be erected and the structure could be hidden inside of that or stealthed. That is not going to work for carriers today. The technology and antennas are only growing in size, and it would limit us to a single carrier, and it would not allow even all the antennas that they would need for 5G, let alone for whatever is going to come down the road. Carriers don't mind hiding something, but they prefer sort of the faux trees that you see where they can have access to the antennas and actually service them if there's a problem without having to disassemble some external shroud or other structure. So the carriers have told us that they are walking away from the site. Now, I want to be clear that any site is still under consideration. If we have an opportunity to do something, we will examine it and consider how it can be a potential site. So we're not saying it's off the list, but I wanted to bring some actual sites that have promise for moving forward for both the town's interests and something that the carriers would be interested in participating in. So the 4 that are listed here are the Umbrella Arts Center, the Tricon Church on Walden Street, Emerson Park, and the Public Safety Building. So first, I'm going to talk about the Umbrella Arts Center. The town issued an RFP back in 2017. Verizon was selected and awarded that RFP, that contract, or that RFP. There was discussion about a contract. It was brought to the select board. There was a lot of discussion and a lot of concerned voices at the meeting. And as a result, I have a quote here from the minutes that were approved, that based on the discussion and public comments, it was clear that alternative sites need to be reviewed before any further action could be taken. This is unfortunately a common trend with the initiative to improve cell coverage, is that when a site is identified, no site is going to be perfect and nobody is going to like every site. And so if a site is proposed, it is discussed, people will always propose another site. And so we have investigated many sites and we continue to investigate more, but that is what happened to the umbrella. The umbrella has a few benefits. First of all, the proposed location would be up in the cupola. It would not be seen. It would not be a new structure that would be built. So there wouldn't be as many issues with the historic aspect of the building or any structures. But there are concerns about this location, even though it's ideal for carriers because it's centrally located for the town and would drastically improve the coverage in all of the town center. They have concerns too, right? Any wireless facility is going to require some ground mounted equipment, generators, networking equipment, and they would need to site that somewhere on the property. That's a concern. They also have participants who come to their programs, children in programs and people who lease space there. They would want to make sure that those people weren't adversely impacted by any decision that was made to put some sort of facility in the building. And historically, the umbrella has tried to be a good neighbor and work with the abutters. And so, they don't want the entire community upset at them for something like this. And so if the umbrella is to be considered a viable site, and it is technically, then it would need public support and it would need support from the board and others, and it would need to be a town-led initiative. The umbrella is not clamoring for the site, regardless of any revenue that would be received by the town or the umbrella. It's not something that they want themselves. So if the town wants it, we can go down that path. And later, I will ask some questions specifically about the umbrella at some other sites. But I'll also mention that local municipalities are not allowed to make considerations about citing wireless facilities based on health concerns. The FCC has issued that ruling, and that is a law. So even though people may have health concerns, the town of Concord is not able to make decisions solely based on those health concerns. Here's a quick map of what the coverage would look like if the umbrella site were turned into a wireless facility. You can see that the area extending all the way down to CCHS and Route 2 is almost covered. The school building itself and the interior of the school would not be covered, nor would all of Route 2, and that's why that other site is still being considered regardless of the downtown solution. And I do believe because of the area to the west of Walden Pond is also a big dead area, that other facility down at CCHS would help over there as well. So the church is another potential site that's being considered. The church is in active negotiations with Verizon for the siting of something. That would be the first step before they could apply for a special permit from the ZBA, if one is found to be required. They did have a Sprint wireless facility for 25 years in this location, which is a benefit of this place because you can't argue that this is something new. They've always had a wireless carrier sited inside the church. This would be yet just another one. We're not sure on that, but we would need to consult the ZBA to get guidance on that. And the other thing about this site is that whereas the umbrella is owned by the town and leased to the Umbrella Arts Organization, this is a private property. The town has no bearing on this. Now, we have reached out to the church. We have reached out to the Verizon representative. We have tried to do what we could to make ourselves available to help to see any project move forward. But right now, this is a negotiation between two private parties, and it's been ongoing for quite a while. And unfortunately, there's not a sign that they've gotten any closer to coming to an agreement with that. This is the coverage map of the church site. It's very similar to the umbrella, but it does closer to the Sudbury River area. It has a little bit of loss of coverage versus the other site. And also in the Northeast, it's not as robust as the umbrella site, but it would largely solve the downtown Concord problem. The areas that are not green would not necessarily have no coverage. You may be able to make or keep a phone call. It's just that the green areas would be where you would definitely be able to make a phone call and access a data network. So the other sites I've just listed on a single slide, the Emerson Park and public safety buildings. Now, there have been mock-ups for these as submitted for RFPs and other proposals that have come into the town. This is town-owned land, so the town can do something in this area, but these would be new structures. These would be things that would be visible to residents, and it would have an aesthetic impact, and it would need to go through a potentially historic district review. and it would affect the character of the town. The other thing I'll mention is that with supply chain shortages, if you want something done soon, an interior structure is going to be much faster than anything that we need to construct, even without the other review process involved. I'll also mention that CPA funds were just recently allocated to restore the flagpole at Emerson Park because it was historic and it was falling into disrepair. And this potential location would be replacing that with a new flagpole that would really be a monopole antenna at the top. And so that's the only proposal we've seen for anything near Emerson Park. In terms of other locations, and this is, I believe, the last slide I've got, we recently met with the Concord Business Partnership and gave them a quick overview of where we were with the project. Many people who own buildings in Concord expressed interest in the ability to site a facility on their building. So we created a GIS connected form for them to submit. We had 5 people submit, and we have 3 locations in the Concord downtown area where business owners who own these buildings have said that they'd be willing to site something. So we are taking a look at those. None of them jump out as necessarily having the right height that we'd be looking at, but everything, again, is on the table. So we're looking at those sites. I mentioned the Concord District Court is on here as well. This site is a little bit too far south to be ideal for downtown Concord, but we have considered it. There has been some analysis by our RF consultant, Ivan, who has been before the board before. And again, not an ideal location, but still being considered to see what the coverage would look like, what the height requirements would be to actually have an impact on all of downtown Concord. And we continue to take suggestions for any other location that people would like to suggest. We would like to try to do that analysis while we keep moving forward and see some progress on this matter. So this is my last slide. Ultimately, essentially what I'd like to ask the board at this point is to ask any questions that you have, offer any feedback, and then specifically discuss 2 things. Number 1, is the board interested in taking a look at the bylaw and considering going through the process of updating that now that we know what the internet is and people access the internet on cellular devices? And then finally, is the board interested in pursuing the umbrella site and think that that site might hold some promise? So,
Terry, go ahead.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really informative. And in my opinion, yes to both of your questions. It's time to look at the bylaw. I'm disappointed we've missed this town meeting cycle, so I guess we don't have to go another year unless we have a special. For the umbrella, what would the process be like? Do you have public hearings? Because if abutters have complained in the past, I'd like to hear again, is there a lot of concern? Because we've heard how much we need this site from many, many people. What about the other side? So what's the process?
yeah, there are different options. Verizon has a theory as to what the town could do to move forward. We've reached out to council. They weighed in back in 2017 when this process was going on, and they weighed in again recently to discuss the different options. The board can enter into leases up to 30 years. I believe the town manager can enter up to leases up to 10 years. Is that true?
Yeah.
So because this has already been an RFP and it's already been awarded to Verizon, there are options to move forward without a significant public input or review. However, historically, it's been the board's wish to listen to the public and take into consideration their feelings and concerns. So that is definitely something we could do, is put together a public hearing, or at least maybe start with some community outreach to explain what this would look like, what the impact would be. There's also, for instance, at the umbrella site, even though there's a lot of people who use that building, any facility that's installed in the umbrella would not necessarily be aiming down in toward the residents of the building. It would be aiming out toward Concord Center. So the residents of the building may not have any greater significant cell impact as, may say, somebody down the street, but the perception might be that they would. And so
Nobody lives there.
right. But so getting out that information about the actual science and how the radio frequency works, and utilizing the third-party consultants that the town has to just get information out there about what this would look like. And then, yeah, whatever process the town manager's office and the board wants to do, we're happy to arrange.
Wouldn't we have to renegotiate the lease with the umbrella? I don't think, I looked at the lease and it didn't look to me as though we had reserved any rights to do anything with that building.
So council seems to think that we could under the current lease, but the umbrella may be willing to agree to that
Anyway.
even under the current lease.
Especially since we've given them a lot of money to improve.
Okay, Mary?
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I think this problem or this opportunity is urgent for all the reasons that you mentioned, not just for downtown Concord, but also for the West Concord Village as well. I know that's part of the longer term, but that's a vibrant business community as well. We have the same public safety issues, but for now, let's focus on downtown. Did I hear you correctly that the FCC says that we are not allowed to block something for health reasons?
Yes.
Okay, I heard that correctly. Great, thank you. And the other thing, can we apply for a variance and not wait for the town to actually pass a bylaw?
Yeah, so when.
So we don't have to wait for the next
Right,
town.
so, and I'll just mention that the current bylaw has been amended to add a waiver so that, because the town of Concord was sued because its bylaw was so restrictive and
Okay.
lost, and the choices were gut the bylaw or add a process to circumvent all the recommendations in the bylaw, which would essentially make it meaningless. So historically, even though that waiver has been there, people have made the argument that this is the place the town meeting voted to approve for infrastructure, and so this is where it should go. But the bylaw itself allows for exemptions from all of those buffers. So any of the sites, the 4 sites downtown that are all outside the district, could be done today through the special permit with the ZBA under the current
So we
bylaw.
don't have to wait for that.
Okay. Linda?
Yeah, thank you, Jason.
Please go on mute if you were on Zoom, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. And 2 questions. One, you mentioned the activity that's going on between the school committee now and the school. What is sort of the time horizon on that? And, you know, is money stopping us? If there was an agreement there, is money stopping us to finish this so that we could install something or?
For the school site?
Typically, revenue goes the other direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, the proposal in its rough form would be that a carrier would work with the town to actually construct a facility, and then the carrier would be granted, you know, a lease on that facility for some number of years, and then the town or the school could use other parts of that structure to lease to other carriers and potentially receive revenue from the other carriers, but not
So I know the
one.
schools have a lot on their plate at the
Yes.
moment that they're interested in, but do you have any sense of, do they have a sense of urgency on this or the priority?
They do. Yep. It's something that we discuss at almost every SMT meeting, and Dr. Hunter has been in communication with our office. We provided her an update last week on the progress, and they've been providing us updates. It has been moving quickly in the last couple of months. So I can't speak to what was going on before that, but I can tell you that there is definitely progress being made, and it is.
You know, many of us in this room sat through the discussions for the umbrella. And, you know, even though FAA does not allow the health concerns to be taken into the action of the town, it gets down to political will and priorities, again, in terms of whether the select board and the town have decided that the public safety issue is a priority and that we need to, you know, be braver in terms of political will. Kais Road, has that been, I don't see it on the list here, and I'm wondering if that's been eliminated.
Well, he described it quite.
He described it,
somewhat.
but in terms
It
of,
has not been eliminated, no. We had a second RFP. The first RFP was withdrawn because all the proposals would have required them give up too many of their parking spaces and operational needs at the Kaiser Road facility. So it was revised and reissued, and we still did get respondents to that, but it quietly died because the carriers kind of walked away from it because it wasn't an ideal site, and they have other sites that they believe would better cover Concord and would be a quicker path to getting solved. Any
Okay.
structure is going to take much longer than
Sure.
siting indoors.
sure.
Would it help if they could locate their own VHF antennas on the cell tower so that they would get better coverage for their own radio signals?
Absolutely.
Okay, I also had a question, which is about the Tricon church site. I mean, does that site enjoy sort of a special status because it is a church? And as a result, it kind of can do what it wants, if you will. I mean, we do have zoning rules, regulations that do apply to churches and schools, but our ability to enforce them is quite limited. And in fact, we do have separate regulations for them for that reason, that they're more advisory.
Yeah. My understanding from talking to Marcia and Elizabeth about this, we had a meeting last week, was that they would still need to go through the same process if it's at the umbrella versus the church. But I think that you're right, it would be an easier path for the church, especially
Yeah, even if we said
considering-
no, they could pretty much just
even yeah, and then considering the fact that it's already been a site, again, it's just harder to argue the health effects angle if it's already been a site for 25 years.
And the radiation does not affect people on Sunday, by the way.
Okay. Well, all right. I do think we are at time
We
here,
are.
unless we have any other.
Could
Do
I
you need a
make
motion or a sense of the board, or?
Do we? What do we? What do you want to get from the
Well,
board?
I would like
tonight?
to move forward with exploring and community input for the umbrella site.
Yeah.
I would too.
What, which sites?
Umbrella.
Umbrella site, the Emerson
Umbrella.
umbrella.
I would like
site.
to move forward with,
Like to do
See,
some
'cause
community
my
outreach.
sense is that
Yeah.
if the status of the Tricon church negotiations are very advanced, that that might be the path of quickest.
Right, well,
but
I
I didn't
understand
hear
that
that.
there are
I didn't
some
hear that.
financial issues there.
They're at an impasse, and I
Okay.
mean, we are trying to pursue all angles. You're right, we
Yeah.
don't want to go too far down a path if suddenly the problem goes away, but we also don't want to have this conversation in
Okay.
3 more
Right,
years.
right,
so-
right.
Right.
But
Right, or even
I would
6
like to
months.
say three things.
Yeah.
One is that we want to get the solution with the best coverage. We want to get the solution that gives us the soonest,
Mhm.
the quickest resolution of the problem. And we need to appoint an executive in the structure of the town whose responsibility is and has the authority to implement those two priorities.
Well, except for that, given that they're going to need a permit,
Well,
it's not
that's part of
solely the authority of that person.
That's part of the implementation.
Well, I agree with Mary. I think that we should ask Jason and Carrie and the whole team, whoever's involved, to
Chris.
start the public outreach. And whatever the select board needs to do to be involved in that, I think we're ready to do that.
Move quickly.
Do any dissenting views?
But it's a matter of, I think we feel this is a matter of urgency.
Yes.
And an answer that we get, even if it's very deliberately arrived at, but is 1.5 years down the road, is not a good answer.
Okay.
Understood, thank you.
All right, then I think we've got that taken care of. So now we are a little behind time, and maybe you could give us a little
can help.
abbreviated view on our IT update.
Yes, so I'd like to invite up Dale Hartling and Neil Fotheringham up here.
Do you want to?
Yeah, maybe. You guys can share.
Who is this one?
IT, GIS.
Okay, great.
So to my right, Dale Hartling, Broadband Manager, followed by Neil Fotheringham, GIS Program Manager. So my name is Jason Bulger. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the town of Concord, and as such, I oversee the Technology Department, which has 4 divisions: IT operations, GIS, Broadband, and Minuteman Media. You're going to get tired of me at this meeting because I've had four agenda topics. So this is the 3rd municipality I've worked in, working at 2 others in Massachusetts, and I absolutely love working in Concord, and everybody that I've encountered has been very welcoming and supportive of IT, which is a breath of fresh air. We have a unique number of highly professional and technical people in town for municipality, and it's been great to work with them. I'm going to discuss the IT operations in Minuteman Media, but first I'm going to invite Dale and Neil to say a few remarks about their respective divisions. Concord Broadband offers internet service to about 1,650 customers in town, both residential and commercial. And customers can get speeds up to 1 gig now, symmetrical, unlike Comcast. So Dale is here to talk about that. So if you want to take just a few, grab the microphone.
My name is Dale Hartling, and I have been here with the town of Concord for a little over 4 months. Prior to coming to Concord, I worked for Cisco Systems for about 20 years, doing validation of cable products and then managing teams that were validating cable products. Prior to that, I worked at Mass Bay Community College for 10 years managing their IT systems. So I have experience with managing IT and network, with managing network engineers, and with broadband. Our fiber optic network is a little bit new, but there are a lot of overlaps with what I did with cable, and I am working hard to come up to speed on that technology. So the broadband division really has two different sides. We've got one side that handles the broadband services, and then we have another side that handles another responsibility, which is for the town's municipal network. So in addition to offering broadband to residents and businesses in the town, we use our own broadband infrastructure to provide networking for all of the offices in the town. And so we have 5 employees, well, 5 positions today. 3 are telecommunications technicians. You may have seen them. They go around in bucket trucks and they will hook up new customers to the fiber optic network, and they will do troubleshooting, they'll do new installation, they'll do upgrades and all of that. And then we have 2 network engineering positions that are responsible for the network back end of the broadband. So the fiber that gets from the pole to your home is a big part of the fiber optic network, but there's a bunch of services that have to be in place and work on the back end to get you from our network out to the internet. And so we have network engineers that manage that part, and then they also are actively working on the town's network. We currently have some projects that have been underway for a while that we're working on, a lot due to supply chain issues that we're still working on them, but we're doing wireless access point updates in all of the town facilities, and we're doing updates to the town's network core system to provide faster service for the town and to allow us to divest ourselves of some on-prem resources and be able to do more cloud-based and have a smaller set of on-prem resources that are shared across the whole town. We are, in terms of broadband and some of the goals that we have, we're trying to improve our installation process. One of the things that has been an ongoing concern is how long it can take a customer from the time that they ask for service until it's available at their front door. So we've been working on streamlining that and identifying obstacles and trying to improve the workflow so that we can get things done faster. We're also working at trying to standardize response times and just overall improving customer service, keeping people informed about what's going on. I think you've probably seen in some of the outages lately, all the work that Jason has done in communicating where we are and what's going on. And that's something that I want to continue to follow up on. So starting at the beginning of this year, we added additional broadband tiers for residential customers. We used to only go up to 300 megabits per second. We now offer a 500 megabit and a 1 gigabit per second symmetrical bandwidth tier for residential. And for businesses, we used to top out at 700 megabits per second, and we now have a business plan that also goes up to a gigabit per second. And in addition to all of that, the last thing I wanted to mention is that we are working to become an authorized participant of the Affordable Connectivity Program that the federal government initiated in the midst of COVID, right? Comcast is part of that. Most of the cable providers are, and Concord has not been. And that will allow us to ease the burden for low-income residents for getting internet connectivity. So.
Thank you. And next, I'll introduce Neil Fotheringham. He is our GIS program manager, Geographic Information Systems, does mapping and analytics for all of the data points that we collect in town. So welcome, Neil.
Hi there. That's about half of my notes, so I'll keep it short. My name is Neil Fotheringham. I'm the GIS program manager here for the town of Concord. Before working here, I've been here for about 6 months now. I came here from working in local and state governments in Arizona and Texas for about 7 years. I joined here now as the team program manager. The GIS team, we provide any geospatial data service required for the town. This can be creating maps, interactive web maps and applications, running spatial analyses. You saw some examples earlier, looking at Wi-Fi coverage. We can also be doing any kind of data product and maintenance and updating like that. Our town services, internal employees, boards and committees, and the public, whether that's from interactive maps for people to view, updating plow routes, looking at economic tourist activities within the town, and looking at sort of internal projects such as with public works. For example, we do a lot of work with public works. Our GIS team is made up of 2.5 full-time employees. We have 2.5 GIS analyst positions currently. We had Jill Moonheron, if people are familiar with her. She formally retired back in January, but is now working part-time to help transition our new employees. So a couple of examples of the work that we do. We're currently working with natural resources to update and maintain our trails layers, making tweaks to our layers there. We use those for public viewings and interactive web maps, but we also use them for internal purposes. So it's important that we maintain and correct our data as we go and as changes get made. We're also working on a large project with water and sewer, looking at the EPA lead and copper rule regulation compliance, which will need to go into effect as of October 2024. So that'll be a large project, again, looking at data maintenance and updating, but also running a lot of analyses to identify where potential copper and lead service lines are within the town. So those are just a couple of examples of the projects that we do in GIS, but yeah, we service the town in general, whether it's internal or external facing applications.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll just briefly cover in 5 minutes or less the IT operations and Minuteman Media.
Can I just say one question on the GIS?
Sure.
Is it possible to integrate the assessor's database and the town's GIS system so that you could, when you click on a property on the GIS, you could click on a link and then get to the assessor's database information on that property?
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, you should be able to do that currently.
Already can do
You
it.
can do that.
Yeah, we have the assessors level 3 data integrated with our parcels.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we can do that.
I've done it.
Yeah, for you.
We just did it just now.
Oh, thank you.
So in terms of IT operations, so, we maintain all of the devices and computers, copiers, phones, wireless, devices that people use in town, troubleshoot for end users. We have information system technicians. We have senior information systems technicians. We have an IT operations manager. We have a business systems analyst and myself. We all work together to provide these services to the town We prioritize things like cybersecurity, end user training. One thing that I wanted to mention along with Neil's discussion is that one of our goals is not to just provide a service and be reactive for when a user has a question or a concern or needs something, but it's to be proactive and get into their workflows, understand what they're doing, and say, how can we turn them onto a new tool or give them something that they didn't have already before to make their jobs easier. And that's something that we try to do often in IT. We do have a third-party managed service provider that provides entry-level help desk support for our users, which allows the IT staff to actually go and interface with users for their problems so that they don't have to deal with things like password resets and things that can be done remotely. And then I just wanted to mention on the topic of cybersecurity that the town was just awarded a cybersecurity awareness grant for the value around $15,000. And this is a service that's been very beneficial to the employees of the town and has increased the awareness for cybersecurity. I'll turn to Minuteman Media very briefly. For the staff, we have a production manager, Mark Polly. We have 2 lead producers, Tori and Matt, and then we have several part-time videographers, one of them who's working the meeting tonight, so thank you for that. The studio space for Minuteman Media is at the high school, and we also do a lot of work outside of the studio where we have been producing a lot of content. I'm really excited to announce that we've reached 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel now, so that was a big milestone. And I want to mention that the reason we got those subscribers is not just because we post a lot of government meetings, it's because of the really thoughtful and informative content that the producers and other staff have made and posted on there. It really gives an idea of the character of Concord, and so we appreciate that. We're going to be nominating 3 pieces that Minuteman Media produced for these hometown video awards, and we hope that we're successful in winning one of those awards for one of those pieces. And then working in conjunction with the PEG Access Committee and assisting with the ongoing Comcast negotiations in any way we can. So those are the updates for the IT department. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So first is about application implementations. So we'll be talking about the Munis implementation soon, and then recently there was an e-permitting application implementation. Can you tell us about any other pending major systems rollouts?
So we're in the middle of an Office 365 migration. The first phase of that was to migrate our email servers to cloud-based servers, and that phase is done. The next phase is to take our document storage, which historically has been on local on-premise file servers, and move that into the cloud as well. This is a project that could have been done in a week if we had just copied everything that we have to the cloud. But what we're doing is a more systemic review, trying to understand from a public records perspective what documents need to be kept, adding retention labels, utilizing all the compliance features that we can have in the system, and also training users to use the system correctly from day one. So we're doing a department by department rollout, and we've completed about 65 or 70% of them so far. And Nate Smith has been instrumental. He's our town archivist and records manager. He's been instrumental in that project and moving that forward and working with departments. So that's been a huge undertaking, and our deadline for ourselves is the end of this fiscal year to be complete with that project.
So that's document management?
That would fall under the category of document management.
What vendor are you using for that?
Microsoft, so Microsoft 365. Okay. So we're utilizing SharePoint.
SharePoint.
Yep.
Okay. Not a full-blown document.
Right, exactly. Now we also use Preservica for preservation of records, and we have a portal for that. And we are looking at a formal, separate document management system outside of 365, and it may be related to Preservica or it may be something else. So that's still kicking around, but we wanted to give operational access for our employees to have cloud-based access, for their files so they could collaborate in real time and make use of all those features.
Okay. Any other rollouts planned?
Other than the permitting, no. And I was going to mention document management, but no.
Okay. And then one of the things I've noted in approving the warrants, and I think I've noted this before, is that trying to centralize procurement for IT, for the phone services, for all of these sort of aspects that I do see a lot of ad hoc individual purchases. It seems like we're missing opportunity to leverage volumes, economies of scale, purchasing agreements and the like. And I just wondered if you have any initiatives in that area.
Yeah, so we work with a few different resellers for a lot of our equipment and contracts, and we've been trying to consolidate those and also move things to more of a regular schedule. It can be a nightmare maintaining the administrative burden of figuring out when different services expire and which vendor is responsible for them. So we have consolidated a number of contracts in IT already, and we're trying to do that more because we had 3 or 4 main vendors that we use and then a smattering of smaller vendors. So where we can purchase from a larger vendor and consolidate, we have done that. The larger vendors are also better about contract pricing, and they understand procurement law better. So we tend to favor those as opposed to the smaller companies that tell us what they think 30B means as opposed to actually complying with the law. I'm happy to work with Gail and her team in seeing how we can also consider streamlining purchasing in conjunction with the Munis project now that we'll have workflows available to us, but we can talk about that in a few
Okay.
minutes.
Other questions,
And,
Linda?
yeah, I just had a question in terms of the GIS. Was that situated in another department and is now moved over here, or?
GIS has always been formally in the IT department, but Public Works did have an analyst that has been moved over to the IT department.
Okay.
Yep.
And then Terry?
So I have 2 questions. One is, I was excited that you're going to, that you've been doing proactive assistance with employees. I think that's awesome. And I'm wondering, this might be too far-fetched with the limited staff you have, but I know when I came on the select board, or even when I was on the finance committee, a lot of these committees, I think, could sometimes use some of that workflow help. Is there any way that you could maybe help out, maybe if someone's chairman, or if there's a lot of people who don't need assistance,
Right.
but I think, we're at all different levels.
Exactly.
So if there's a way to help some of the.
Yeah, I
big
think that
committees.
there's a way we could put together some more onboarding things, just like we do for our employees.
Onboarding,
Yeah,
right.
so that, I think it would be probably in conjunction with the town manager's office, the clerk's office, and IT to put together some resources and maybe some FAQs on how certain business can be conducted for new board members. I think luckily most boards have established members, and so the new members can kind of learn how business has been done, but sometimes the turnover is quick and it does help to have those resources at their fingertips. So I think that's a great suggestion.
Right.
Mary.
Oh, wait,
Oh,
and,
yes.
my other question was, I don't know if I'm going to remember it now.
Uh-oh.
Go ahead
Go, Mary.
while I
I'll
think
go.
of it.
I'll go. You can go back. I've got a question about broadband. I heard that, welcome, Dale. I heard that some of your priorities are response time and installation time. And I know that the financials for the broadband line of business now fall under CMLP, specifically as an enterprise fund, kind of within an enterprise fund.
Correct.
So how is that working? Are you going to maintain control of it financially, or how? What's your thinking going?
Well, I think,
So it's definitely a unique situation. The good news is that Carrie, Dave, and I all work really well together, and we have a lot of open communication. So what we're trying to do right now, working with Matt Cummings, the financial director over at CMLP, is more clearly draw the lines between the businesses for broadband and CMLP. Historically, the water has been a little muddy in terms of how we track certain things. So we've come a long way in terms of isolating the different expenses. We could take it really far and get sort of burdened with the administrative costs of like, we're billing you for that and you're billing us for this. And we're trying not to go too far down that path, but where it's really clear and where we can do it, we've done it already. And Matt, every year we sort of chip away at those goals of consolidating the controls that would keep things separate and identified.
Where I'm really going with this is how far can we go down the road of installing new people onto broadband when it makes economic sense? And when does it become too expensive to do so? Because I know we've been kind of cherry picking at the beginning, and each installation, especially where I live, it's prohibitively expensive to actually install broadband. So at some point, you're going to come to where it just costs, the business can't afford or can't fund continued expansion. So and I'm wondering if you're thinking about that.
Oh, yeah.
Like implementing the fiber broadband task force
Right,
recommendations.
and
That's where I'm-
at the last light board meeting, I did give an update on that task force's recommendations and how we've
there.
been, just for the other boards
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah.
We continue to look at those goals, but so I think what's going to happen is revenues will gradually increase. We're seeing no signs that the interest is slowing down. We can't install everybody because they might require conduit or additional upgrades for themselves, but we will get to a point. Now, our analysis is such that because we've grown very conservatively, that we will still be generating an excess of revenue that we could put aside to fund expansion. Now, that expansion could be used for some of the MDUs that might net a lot of customers, but might have a one-time, large cost to get in there. So that would be our next approach, most likely, is to identify the best way we can get into those markets for the lowest amount of money, and then use the capital that we've
Well, it sounded
accumulated.
like Wi-Fi was one option.
Right, exactly.
And so the reference earlier, I think Dale made it, was to accessing some federal infrastructure money. So is that going to affect this?
That was for subsidizing low-income customers. That was not using ARPA money, even though ARPA money technically it falls under that category. But we have not had a formal conversation about that, other than that we've proposed like lost revenue from the CARES Act, and also potentially putting aside some money for whenever we do a roads project, putting conduit in preemptively so that we don't ever have to dig up that road again if we were to lay.
So in some cases, that's also linked to lack of infrastructure for those individuals?
Exactly, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so I think we want to wrap up this
Right,
discussion.
my other
we
question
do,
was
sorry.
really quick. When you said you hit that milestone of 1,000,
Yes.
just explain why that was significant.
Well, it's significant because that's sort of the metric that YouTube uses to signify when a content creator or channel has reached primetime status, when it starts recommending the content outside of the local network. So if you search Minuteman Media, of course, it's going to come up. But if you search Concord Meetings now, you might see Minuteman Media content come up. It also allows the channel to be monetized, which could be used to completely disable ads on every video, or to display ads and actually receive the revenue from the ads that Google has previously been recouping. So it allows more options.
Yeah, we're going to be in the money here with this.
Yeah, because we're meeting all night tonight, right?
Yeah.
Right.
If you guys
They
could
get-
say
they get
something,
value for their money.
if you guys could say something really crazy, the number of
Don't
views.
worry. Okay, so maybe we should invite Gail up and
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you.
members here, and
Quite an ambitious meeting.
it is.
Going on.
We
really.
wanted to really do it all with communications and IT tonight, wireless communications to broadband. Yeah,
Save time. I mean,
yeah.
my
Okay,
gosh, Jason, you're still here.
I'm still here. You can't get rid of me.
yeah,
Have your microphone over there, by the way.
all right.
Great, thank you very much. I was asked to come here tonight to do a quick update on the Munis implementation to give folks a sense of where we are. I talk very fast, so I think I'm going to be able to make up time for you.
All right, go ahead.
So.
We'll claim that.
Not getting you any hits tonight, though. So we are currently, the town of Concord is in the process of converting its legacy enterprise resource planning software from admins to Munis. Admins is a very old, we may be one of the sole survivors still utilizing the system. It has a very dwindling base. We went out and are going with Munis, which actually is one of the top municipal software providers within the state of Massachusetts. The majority of municipalities utilize this software. Jason and I both come from other municipalities that utilized it, so we bring the knowledge we had from having gone through either implementations or utilizing the software. We're looking to modernize our ERP application, improve processes. One of the guiding principles we have is we're challenging everything as we go through this implementation, how we're doing things, how do we streamline, how do we become more effective as we go through it, while maintaining the security and integrity of the system. We spent a lot of time at the beginning doing deep dives to understand our current process so we could understand how to build it within the new system, the entire time challenging ourselves to think outside the box. How could we do things differently, as well as utilizing the consultants to tap into all of the Munis functionality that they have readily available. We are trying to not customize where we do not need to customize, because as we proceed with upgrades each year, the more customization you do, the more difficult it can be to upgrade. So we are trying to utilize what they have, be very discerning when we need to do any customization. We currently have 2 targeted go live dates. We have this first part's in 2 phases. We have the financials, which we are slated to go live April, I think the Monday is April 3rd. And then the second phase will be the revenue, which we are targeted to go live May of 2024. We are still looking at, there are a host of other modules available within the Munis suite. One of the areas that Jason and I have started the conversations is within the human capital, the payroll and HR function. So we've had a couple of demos with that to start to lay out what this could look like down the road once we have these 2 modules, looking to increase the suite. And then that would really allow us to take even more advantage of what this application can do. We have a core implementation team, which is made up of Jason and myself. We have the town accountant, the budget and purchasing director, the deputy treasurer collector, the assistant town accountant, assistant treasurer, the senior budget analyst, the town assessor, and the senior administrative assistant within assessing. So we have a pretty broad group of folks, mainly because every aspect of the system touches other aspects. So we don't want to do something on the financial side that the treasury side can't do. We want to make sure assessing is understanding. So while it is a big time commitment, we're making sure we have the right people involved throughout the whole process. We are utilizing the Tyler implementation team. We have 2 teams currently that are working close together. There's a team on the financial side and a team on the revenue side. So they are 2 separate paths that are actually happening at the same time. And we also utilized the Abrahams group at the beginning to help us with the chart of accounts redesign. The modules we're doing currently, so for the financials would be the accounting, traditional general ledger side, your accounts payable, budget, cash management, where we're looking to streamline and automate our cash reconciliations, which I'm excited for. I don't know if my team's as excited, but I'm excited. Purchasing, one of the items that Jason did mention is that we're looking to centralize. You've noticed even in the budget process, we're starting to centralize the cost through this process, and implementing workflow. We'll also be able to really start to centralize. If it's an IT purchase, it has to go up this path. If it's a facilities purchase, it has to go up this path. So we're casting a pretty good net to help us look at our costs, look at items, and really do much more on the procurement side. We also will be, the other one I'm excited about, because I'm the accountant of the group, the P-card statement automation. So there are feeds within Munis where you can get the information electronically to help you populate all of your bill schedules and other information. If you procure it on the front end and then you get the statements, you can match them up. So it saves a lot of time once it's up and running. So we're looking to implement that as well. And then capital assets, so we'll be looking to do fixed assets, assigning projects as we go further along, as well as bringing in any balances or accounts that currently are not within the admin system. We're going to be looking to bring those in. So trustees, town donations, a lot of stuff that's done in Excel. We're going to be looking to phase that in. That will not be the April, that'll more so, I know Shannon, it'll more so be the July timeframe once we have everything up and running. And this will really allow us to do more real-time reporting, to be able to get the information out of the system. We're doing, the implementation included 5 years of historical data, high-level data, not the transactional level, which will allow us to do reporting. We are converting all of our accounts payable side, so all of our vendors. So that was a big process to go through and scrub the vendors. We didn't want to just bring everything in if we didn't need it. And we're also creating crosswalks because our chart of accounts changed, our vendor numbers changed. So we'll be doing a lot of outreach to folks so that they're comfortable with how to look up information, because your old vendor number will not be your new vendor number. On the tax side, we are converting 10 years of historical data, so we've worked closely with the Munis implementation team, and that is standard. So that will be the CAMA, Vision Bridge, the title tax, motor vehicle excise tax, tax billing, and then the associated accounts receivable and general billing. So we have 3 different phases that we're working through with that. Between February and December, we had over 50 days of meetings focused solely on this. It's a combination of half-day sessions, full-day sessions, where we went through data conversion, system setup, and training the key staff, which is the core staff within the accounting area. We're currently having bi-weekly status meetings with the group to make sure that we're all on top of all of the items, where we stand, and sort of now we're at the punch list of items we need to do before go live. We've established, Jason and I spent a lot of time establishing the end user accounts. We have about 100 users that we've set up in the system, and we've gone through to make sure segregation of duties. It's one of the great things about Munis is you can actually get down to a very minute level of detail in what you're giving people access to. So tapped into Jason's knowledge on that one. And we went person by person, role by role. The great thing is you create roles and then you just group the people in the roles and assign the roles to the people. So it's actually
And people can take over if someone's on vacation and.
the workflow, the forwarding. We're also moving that function. I'll move over in case Jason hits me, moving that function over to IT. So we have complete segregation of duties, that the accounting people will not be creating our own access, which actually is a good practice to do. And we're going to be doing dedicated training for the end users. We have a full week of training scheduled the week of March 20th. And there'll be small sessions, so the heavy AP users will come in, the people that are doing procurement and entering recs will come in. So we've sliced it out so that someone doesn't have to sit there for 8 to 10 hours. We're videotaping everything, so we will have information to hand out all electronically and filed away. We'll also have videos that people can get back out to if they have questions. The other part that we're doing is making sure, as we're getting closer to go live, that we have processes in place to make sure, because now we're at the place where we almost have to do parallel dual entry. We've got vendors being created in the live system. We have to make sure that they're in any new GL accounts. We'll be going through a pretty detailed PO conversion, because we have to convert any open POs. So we'll have cutoff procedures. We have good process in place to make sure that we have all the actuals through March 31st in the system tied out before we go live. And then we have already set aside additional training as we get closer to year end, so that when we go to close the books, folks will have a little bit extra training. We also are planning on having the Munis individual here the week we go live. It's belts and suspenders to me. He's located in Maine, but I would rather have a person sitting next to me to say, this didn't work, we need to get it addressed. So we have that. And then we'll make the go, no-go decision mid to end March if we're not ready for the April, but we're feeling confident about that, as we're very close to bringing over all of the historical data, which we've tied out in 3 databases at this point. So a lot of fun with that. So that is the high level overview of Munis.
Yeah, sure, go, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you, Gil. I really wasn't aware of all the work that you were doing, so thank you for that. I've got a question, I've got a wish list here. Something I've always wanted to know is spending against a project. Is there any project management module? So for example, White Pond, right? We appropriate over several years, we spend over several years. Are we going to have any way of looking at projects?
That module does exist within Munis. We're dipping our toe in the water with the go live. That will be sort of a phase 2 enhancement once we get up and running, but it does have project module.
Okay. And I mean, I realize that during the implementation, there are extra costs and there's transition costs, but do you have any kind of model for what the expected savings will be, either in, license costs, maintenance costs, overhead, manual effort, all of those things?
I don't have that yet. We did the 3-year license agreement. I think it's a difficult question because some of it will be more soft costs where it will not take people as long to enter items as it used to. Things will go through the workflow. We won't have paper
Right.
floating around. So I would not anticipate drastic bottom line savings. It's more the time it takes for people to do things and the ability to do more enhanced reporting out of Munis. One of the other great features is you can do a lot more budget to actual reporting, 5-year analytical trends. There's a lot more, and it's a lot easier to get the information in and out of the system, dump it in Excel, pivot it. So I think we'll be able to see better utilization of the data we have available to us,
Okay.
which will help when
Yeah.
we're building budgets.
And I was just going to say budgets. Right now, we send out thousands of Excel spreadsheets to different departments, try to consolidate everything. This process will look so different. Departments will be able to enter their own budgets. It can be rolled into a proposed budget. Town manager can amend the budget, and every time the version gets sort of stamped and sealed and moved along, by the time the select board and FinCom vote it, it becomes like a preliminary budget, and then once it's approved at town meeting, you can press a button and the budget is built in. Whereas now, it's not like that at all. It's
Well,
weeks at a time.
and in fact, that brings me to the other question that I had, which is my very least favorite thing to do as a select board member is to review the
The warrant.
warrant. And I just think, among those roles and separation of duties, will the select board have any opportunity to have direct access to the system? Because
Absolutely.
in approving the warrants, to actually be able to not only see what the expense was, but against what budget line it was,
Right.
how much of that budget line has been consumed of the year.
Right.
This just provides so much more context for understanding these
Right.
expenses and would lead to a lot fewer questions and I think just a better flow.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway,
save
I know
Mary
that we
Barrett.
don't want to become like,
Right.
heads down data entry people, but there must be a way.
We asked that question early on in the process, and typically you create a role for auditors that's just a very high-level read-only
Yeah, yeah.
role, and that is often what communities give to select board members or
That's
FinCom
great. I
members.
would have saved Mary Barrett a lot of hours.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. It sounds very exciting and also
And I got you
probably,
back on track.
yeah, and so we'll see, a lot of sleepless nights, I'm sure, right around go live.
Yeah, good luck.
Excited is the right
Maybe a
word.
lot of candy downstairs.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are ready to move to the Hanscom Field development. So we have had a lot of discussion, I think, in the community. There was a lot of meeting, well, not a lot, unfortunately, I think relatively few meetings that were attended by members of the board. And I think at this point, our point of action is really to express the town's perspective on this proposed project. I think that while we haven't in our packet a copy of the literal letter that is to be approved, we do have a printed copy, don't we? Do we also have a separate email attachment?
Are you
Yeah,
talking
so-
about the Hatch letter, or are you talking about some other letter?
So the Department of Planning and Land Management wrote a memo. And
we have that?
basically, the body of that,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
in the
that's in
packet.
our packet. And the body of that memo essentially is the body of the letter.
Right.
So in other words, we would change the,
Well-
top section that's
Right. To
identifies it as a
back up,
memo
though,
to,
We just need to explain.
Yeah, and Marcia's on the line. She may want to.
okay, so Marcia. Okay, thank you. Yeah, because we did not have the benefit of this letter online.
No, I provided you a memo that provided the background of what was being proposed, and a couple of graphics, one of the map and one of a picture, but everything else is pretty much what was in that memo. So it was converted into a letter for your consideration. I'm sorry that it didn't get in by noon on Friday, but I felt that background was really important and critical to understand, since the MIPA process is really all about gathering information and answering questions. There are 83 different criteria that MIPA evaluates, and this project hits about 6 of those. So that's why I provided the background information. And then I kept it at a generally high level. I think you have other information that you have received today from HVAC committee that has more detail in it. This is a fairly high level response, but it's asking the MIPA review to provide critical information about a variety of different things having to do with the noise and visual intrusions, the vehicular traffic, the air quality, climate change, rare species impacts, the carbon footprint of what's being proposed, the economic impacts, and public benefits. Because this isn't an approval process, it is gathering information to understand the impacts, environmental impacts. And I think this information that's gathered will be used by decision makers at the state level and possibly even at the federal level, and maybe even at a municipal level where this is all located in Bedford. So those are the kinds of things that I brought to the table with this letter.
And what I think might be a practical way forward, just given that this is a 3-page memo, and it does sound like members of the board really haven't had much opportunity to
Shannon
review
is
its
copying
content,
it right now for
that
us.
what I would propose is this, that we empower a member of the board to represent the board in reviewing and then sending this letter on. And I would nominate Terry, or actually Linda is the liaison to the
HATS. And we have our representative here tonight for the advisory commission, and they've written a letter as well.
Right, and so the HATS will be sending a letter. That makes sense, but the town also should be, the board should be sending a letter.
Can I just comment? Shannon, I just asked Shannon because we can't quite read that.
It's very hard to read.
She's copying it for us, but I do see Marcia has, I was thinking along the same lines, Matt, of
Yeah.
having one member, but I do see that
The due
pretty
date is tomorrow, by the way.
That's what I mean, so
due
we
date is
need,
tomorrow.
it's urgent.
But wait a second, I think that it's done as soon as Shannon comes back, because Marcia's correct. She's got it all, I think, in here. As soon as we see the
Basically, the
copy.
top of page 2 is the second paragraph there, and then from there on.
Well, I don't know. Let's see the copy.
Had she seen Dan Schrager's letter, the one that came in?
Yes, I saw that letter. I thought it was an excellent letter.
Excellent letter from the point of view of somebody who actually knows and uses Mansfield Field.
Yes.
Right, and I think the HVAC letter was also really excellent. Okay, so it's only a page and a half now. Is this
Right, because essentially,
Oh, all right, wait a minute now.
Marcia, can you tell us that is it essentially identical from the top
Oh,
of
wait a
page
minute.
2
No, it's on the back.
through,
2.5, okay.
yeah, through the last paragraph, which then goes back to the letter form?
I think there is an opening paragraph.
And then in the memo, you go, at this point, the MIPA process is not, and instead you go, the select board recognizes that.
Yes, that is correct.
Right, so otherwise, the body of the memo and the body of the letter are the same.
Is it the same, Marcia, all the rest
Yeah.
of it?
Yes, it is,
Okay.
correct. The
Well, I
opening
think-
paragraph and the final paragraph are different.
I've read the memo and I
Right, and I think you did an excellent job outlining all of those. I think the only two things that are still on my mind, one could be added, would be something about air traffic. Will there be larger planes or will the flight patterns change? I'm not sure if that was here. And the other thing, I don't know if it belongs in this memo, maybe it's something that, Marcia, you could just explain to us. I was just really confused, and I think a lot of people are confused about, this is phase one of MEPA, and then there's other steps of MEPA, and there's NEPA, and there's DEP. Can you explain the process to us?
I don't know if I can explain the entire process, but the MEPA process is to first the secretary determines whether a project requires an environmental notification form and whether there is a mandatory environmental impact report that needs to be prepared. In this case, the secretary of the EEA, and sorry, I don't remember, environmental affairs or energy and environmental affairs, requires that it follow the ENF and EIR process. So the environmental notification form was prepared. That's what we are responding to. And we identify the questions and concerns and issues that we want more information on. That is taken by the proponent, the applicant, and they put together a report, a draft environmental impact report with all of the facts and the research and information that answers all of the questions that are being raised in the letters and responses coming from the 4 communities. And then we all get a chance to review that draft environmental impact report and then comment on it and ask more questions or take issue with whatever. And then they put together a final environmental impact report. And that final talks about what mitigation might be necessary, what reductions might be necessary, what changes might be necessary to this project. But then there are other decisions that are being made along the way, such as the governor, I think, has to sign off on the land transfer because that's their responsibility. And there may be other reviews that have to take place. I know that there will be a historic review because the structure is there's an existing structure that is historic, and they're talking about restoring that, so that there will be different state agencies that will look to this document as a guide as they go forward with their permitting.
That's really helpful, thanks. So those were my 2 questions. So I think that process question doesn't belong in this comment period. But possibly the other one I was asking about, whether the size of the plane to the flight paths, we could just add that as another bullet point on page 2. But I think other than that, I think the letter is really excellent.
Well, I did have one concern, which is that the assertion I think that the applicant has made is that this would in fact reduce the number of flights.
Right.
So therefore they might be inclined to dismiss bullet 1 on noise, bullet 3 on air quality, bullet 4 on climate change,
Right.
and then, bullet 6 on carbon footprint. But my sense is that while that might temporarily be the case, that the increased hangar capacity and probably increase in demand could eventually lead to not only, an increase in that traffic, but that there could still do ferrying on top of that.
Absolutely.
So I just think that we need to really state that the applicant, if they are asserting this, they need to be able to back it up.
Right.
In
so
other
she's
words, they
got that
need to
in
have
there. But I'm thinking, listening to you.
performance guarantees in effect, right?
So I think on the top of page 3, she says, the statement about the reduction of the ferry flight should be supported with accurate numbers. I think
But it's not just a point in time, it needs to be
Right.
for the future.
Right, so
right?
maybe we could move that paragraph up towards before all those bullet points and say, we want, because someone asked.
Well, and I just think a comma at comma, information provided, comma, and guarantees
Yes.
provided for future performance.
Because someone asked that in the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, because otherwise those assertions don't mean anything to me.
Someone asked.
And I just don't want this entire thing to be dismissed in the name of, well, we're going to reduce the number of ferry flights, and as a result, the total number of flights, and that actually being forgotten within a year.
Right, so someone from, I think, the Lincoln Planning Board asked in the Zoom meeting, would you guarantee a certain number of ferry flights in order to
Right.
get approval for this project? Would you be willing to guarantee? And the proponent said, we will think about it, maybe we can do that. So maybe we should suggest something like that.
Well, getting back to here we are, I don't think that we can wordsmith the exact words
Right.
tonight. I do see the draft letter has my signature line next to it, but is there someone who would really feel motivated to add those 2 points at least and to sign this on behalf of the board?
Well, I think Marcia has captured that, right? I see her.
Right, well, she could provide a new draft, but
Yeah.
then I think someone needs to review that draft and then sign it.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do
I'm
it.
willing
I
to
could do it, but as the chair, but you, Linda, you could do it also as
I'm willing
the
to.
select board member and liaison to
Sure. I'm
these organizations.
willing to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we need a vote for that. Do we need a vote to send a letter? I don't think we do. Okay.
Just need the postage.
Well, it does, we do have a draft motion here. Do you want to just do it? We are taking
All right,
action
fine.
on behalf
All
of the
right,
board.
move to
Okay?
approve and submit the letter as drafted by Marcia and amended by Linda by tomorrow regarding Hanscom Field North Airfield Development for public comment to the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act Office.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Can I just follow that up with saying, in addition to the letters that we've mentioned from the Hanscom Field Advisory Commission, the letter that Henry mentioned, there was also one that came in from the National Park this afternoon, which is equally important. And while this is an emphasis on the environmental piece of it, you know, along the way, we're trying to also talk about the economic impact that this is going to have in terms of, because of there is federal review required, as Marcia mentioned, for the historic piece of this. So we may or may not be able to wind at least some reference to that in here, but we'll.
Okay. All right, then I think we're ready for committee nominations.
Okay. Historic Districts Commission, Kate Chartiner of 888 Sudbury Road as a full member representative for the Concord Museum for a term to expire January 1st, 2027.
Okay, and committee appointments.
Move to appoint Joe Palumbo of 90 Black Horse Place to the DEI Commission for a term to expire April 30th, 2025, and move to appoint Timothy Whitney of 315 Lexington Road as an associate member to represent the Concord Museum on the Historic Districts Commission for a term to expire January 1st, 2027.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now we come to correspondence. I'd just like to acknowledge 11 pieces of correspondence that were included in our packet. Many of them on the topic of the emergency family shelter, as well as some correspondence that we got on the Hanscom Field North Airfield Development, which we just discussed as a board. That also there were several that we have received that were regarding the 615 Lowell Road litigation, which we were not publishing according to our policy. And another couple of letters that arrived too late for our deadline on Hanscom. So now we're moving to public comment. So if,
About liaison.
liaison reports. Yeah, we did skip those last time. I just realized who were late. We always. What's new?
CMLP. Laura Scott gave a presentation the other day about the solar installation at CMS. And right now, they're estimating a total cost for both the solar array and the battery at 7.5 million.
Instead of 13.
Yeah, instead of 13.
feels a little
No, but
better.
they didn't have a lot of confidence in that number, so that number's still fluid, but it's a lot less than the
So the
13.
business plan, it looked a lot better.
Yeah, so they still have, and with that, it would result in a $27 per year increase to the ratepayers on average, the
At the
average
beginning, but then it would
for a whole 20
eventually.
years. They
Oh, really? Because
yeah,
I thought it eventually ended up being a benefit
increase.
over time.
an increase,
You
yes.
mean-
Well, and I was struck as well, though. I read the Acton Boxborough report for their, greening plan. And they stated pretty upfront that this isn't for free. This is going to cost something.
Yeah.
You can't do it for no cost.
So it was $27 per year for the average household over 20 years if they don't get any of the Inflation Reduction Act grants and they don't get any ARPA funds. If they get that, then it could go down as low as $14 per year per average ratepayer.
Yeah.
But again, these numbers are fluid, okay?
Right. And then I think they represented it as well as sort of cents per kilowatt hour,
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but they expressed it in the
total net of
the total increase to the bill
That's
per
the
year.
capital cost
The capital
Well,
cost is about
spread over
7.5.
But
with the
without-
financing. And
without
Yes.
credit for the value of the electricity generated?
Yeah, including the credit.
They
for the
netted
elec-
everything,
Net,
everything,
that's
out.
a net.
They netted everything out, right,
Yeah.
right. So in order to cover the cost of this,
It's
over
not a
20 years, they
zero
had to
cost.
increase the revenues from the ratepayers, and that increase from the ratepayers will be about $27.
I mean, as you can imagine, to build an energy facility in Concord is not the cheapest place in the world to do it.
Well, the real estate is free, though, for this project.
Well, even if with free real estate, I'm sure it's not a cheap place to put up a facility. And then secondly, that for solar, I mean, we do have some, solar capacity here, but it's not the world's best solar site either. Again, it doesn't have trees,
Now,
so
wait
that's
a
good.
minute, But with
Anyway,
climate
there's a
change, we
hearing.
get more sunlight.
There's a
No,
hearing.
the Earth still turns in the same axis.
There is a hearing on February 28th. There'll be a forum with the public so that they'll answer any questions that you have. And there's also going to be a hearing before the town meeting, the normal FinCom hearing for any finance-related article, and that will be March 15th. So there's two opportunities to learn more about this, February 28th and March 15th.
Okay.
Okay, next thing, Trails Committee. The Bruce Freeman Rail Trail connection from Sudbury is coming in and should hit White Pond any day now. So they're,
I've seen the cut.
yeah, they're
through
tearing down
Sudbury.
trees and pulling up rails, right?
Yeah.
So that should hit over there. Economic Vitality Committee, they're eager to look at, to learn more about to welcome the Economic Vitality Director on board. They heard from Aaron Stevens about the intersection improvements, and they were received very favorably. And they also had a long discussion about the economic impact of low cell phone coverage.
And they sent us a letter.
And they sent you a letter as well. Rec Commission is working, they had a long talk about, oh God, how do I say this? Discounts that they're giving to town employees for the use of recreational facilities, including the Beatty Center. Very complex schedule. They're also moving ahead with their strategic plan. They're going to have a public forum on March 8th. They're going to have a survey available online, and they're hoping to still complete that facilities strategic plan by November. That's all I got.
All right. Linda?
Sure, okay. There have been a number of housing committee meetings, and there's a lot of interplay at this point between the Concord Housing Authority and the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust and the Concord Housing Development Corporation, as they are shifting perhaps their priorities between Assabet River Bluff and some new development in Junction Village, potential new development there that we heard about. So it could include conveyance of splitting the Assabet River Bluff property into two segments with conveyance to the Concord Housing Authority for the existing structure there.
2 units?
That could be 2 units. There will be some delay, however, in it being eligible for SHI because there's a current tenant in that they do not want to vacate as a
To evict.
to evict. It does not look good for affordable housing to, yeah.
Ironic.
So that's going on. There's progress being made on the habitat, as you can see, new habitat building on Com Ave. There's now 3 walls up, I think, that are framed in at least. There was a lot of discussion at CHCD about the potential new proposal that came for Junction Village, and sort of a reminiscent and review of the history of the initial public process that was, quite frankly, not in place when they first started that project. And so
They
they're
weren't having public meetings.
right. And finally, CHC, after significant concerns from both the select board and the public, they followed open meeting law, even though they're not required to do so. They've followed open meeting law since. Now, having said that, that very night, they were meeting with the abutters to Junction Village to talk about this potential new proposal. But it was announced that morning and it was not publicized as a public process. But Lee Smith, as the chair of the CHCD, was going to attend anyway, just to get a feel for where the neighbors are coming from and what they would like to see. But I think going forward, they're acutely aware that they want to make this a public process and the need to do so. So as I say, I've jumped between a number of the committees. And then the other thing I would say about the municipal trust is that they are trying to, working with Rizzo and Liz Russ and the Regional Housing Service Office, make sure that the impetus and the momentum from just coming off of a successful HPP approved housing production plan, that the momentum is not lost. And so roundtable discussion, which the select board will be invited to on April 12th at 7 o'clock, will include all the housing groups. The planning department will be invited, select board will be invited, and I'm sure I'm leaving out others. Anyone who is mentioned as a leader or co-sponsor for implementation in the housing production plan will be invited. CPC. And so that roundtable has met in the past, but it's being expanded to make sure everyone who's named as an implementer is there. And before I lose my voice totally, I think I'll end there.
Okay.
I will say that the meeting that many of us went to for the Hanscom Field, the fact that there was less than a week to file a response for a project of this magnitude, I feel is really disingenuous. But I think all of the groups, or many groups and individuals, have responded as quickly as they could to meet this week deadline. There were 144 people on that call. So pretty good for the short notice that we had to attend that meeting.
Very good, yep. And the elected officials, Senator Barrett, Simon, they spoke out really eloquently. It was really good.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I also went to the site visit. There were 50 or more people there, but wasn't that organized, I didn't think. We kind of wandered around, but there were a lot of people there, so strong interest. Should I
Go ahead.
continue? Okay, so UCargill is expanding community outreach to make sure that residents know all about UCargill and tax relief opportunities. And they've raised the distribution guidelines to $500 a month per household or $1,500 per year for the applicant. They don't want to have it be a secret. So if you want to find out about it, go to the UCargill on the website under committees. I went to the Transportation Committee, And one of the interesting things is that there are a number of projects that have been asking for relief from the parking regulations. We've had Cafe Nero, Concord Academy. We have one coming up this week. There was another one they talked about. So Aaron Stevens is drafting an updated parking policy that might eventually be incorporated into the zoning bylaws, or in another policy. So we'll be hearing more about that.
I mean, we do already have a 6-point policy for how to get parking relief.
Right, but they want to,
But that policy actually makes it more difficult to get the waivers, not easier.
yeah, they want to make it easy, really, they want to streamline the whole thing. And so stay tuned, they've just started on it. I don't have enough detail right now. Okay, Shared Streets Forum, everybody knows they're doing the bump outs at Main and Walden, and the goals are ADA access, public safety for pedestrians. They want something that has low maintenance and will improve stormwater drainage. The cars will be able to see the pedestrians before they're in the roadway with these bump outs, and it's supposed to be done before 2025. So that would be a good thing. Also, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is coming into a new phase. The construction is nearing completion, and they're going to start having more emphasis on maintenance. So at some point soon, they might need a revision to their charge. There was some brainstorming done about that. Barbara Pike from the Friends suggested maybe it could evolve to be bike and pedestrian safety subcommittee of the Transportation Committee. That's one idea that came out. And another thing that happened at that meeting is those beautiful murals that are in West Concord. Margot Kimball was there to describe the new mural they're working on that's going to center around the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail this spring. And then finally, the 2229 committee. If you recall, a few months ago, we had a discussion and we decided we were going to work on a task force. So I've gotten a lot of input on an initial draft. We're on round 3, and you'll be seeing draft 3 in the beginning of March for our meeting. We're going to be having another discussion on that. That's it.
Okay, Henry?
Two of our recent appointments to the HDC took their places on the HDC before the most recent decision, but did not participate in it. And the nominee that we approved today, who will be appointed at our next meeting, I'm meeting with her tomorrow and talking with her. And so we will now have 3 new members on the Historic District Commission to fill, I think, all the current vacancies. The Civil War Monument, I wanted last time to take note of the untimely death of Matt McGrath, who was a very dedicated member of that committee and is greatly missed by the members of that committee. And like the esprit de corps of that committee is so strong that they want to leave his name on the list of members and replace him with his wife, just as Rosa Hallowell, who had to leave for family reasons. They also want to carry on that list of members of that. It's actually a task force, isn't it? And they have gotten a grant for $12,500 for part of their work. They're asking for, as CPA has on the town meeting warrant, $16,500, and they're also applying for an additional grant now for historical preservation. And the updated restored monument will be dedicated on Memorial Day in 2024. the 3 relatively new members on the Public Celebrations Committee have also been seated and are participating actively in the committee's activities. And and the committee now has a new chair. Sue McCrory is now the chair of the Public Ceremonies Committee. They have received nominations for 5 candidates for the Honored Citizen, which is a significant improvement over.
Wow, that's a big number.
Over recent years. And I know who they are, but I can't tell you.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add on the housing meeting that Linda attended, I was also there. And my surprise was that there was very limited enthusiasm for the project that had been presented to us at our last meeting, where we thought that it might be something that would be ready to be implemented on an accelerated schedule to meet some of our quota needs. But there was, to my surprise, very limited enthusiasm from the housing people for that project. And it was stated that although that was the first one, they were going to be soliciting others and going through a very thorough public hearing process in order to choose what should be done on that site. So I think it's going to be probably a number of years before we actually get anything built on that site.
Well, and that was the expectation. I think we had heard before that if this one project wasn't approved, it would take a long time to get the next one. So I was surprised when there was an assertion that we could get something fast.
I expected that there might be some enthusiasm for it. There was a little bit more enthusiasm from Liz Rust, who just thought that it would be sufficient to run it by the West Concord Village Association. And then the questions that came up were like, well, how representative is that association? So it's going to be a process and it's going to take a while. And that may not all be bad, because what my view, which is not anything that was discussed there, is that we really need to address our housing quota issue, not through trying to win the race against 40B, but by adopting improved or appropriate zoning and incentives to make the private construction of affordable housing more attractive than going under comprehensive permits.
Okay, thank you. So just the only thing I want to report is I attended 2 different school committee meetings. The public school committee at the first one ratified the reduction in budget of $150,000, about which we've heard previously, leaving still a gap of $500 and something thousand from guideline. Then today there was a follow-up meeting at which the superintendent walked through this new budget set of numbers and more or less described why they can't go down any further. So there will be a meeting day after tomorrow, I guess, between the finance committee and the school committee, but to my mind, that kind of set the tone for that discussion.
And would you say they're 500,000 apart?
580 or
Something like
something,
that?
500,
Okay.
yeah.
And this is CPS?
This is CPS.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the high school is?
High school is in
Okay,
guideline,
okay.
at guideline.
All right.
Should we remind people that there is an election on the 16th?
Yes.
Oh, well, that's separate, yeah.
Well, that may be separate. but-
Yeah, so this Thursday, of course, there's
Yes.
a election, a townwide election to
On the middle school.
to
fund
approve $7.2 million of additional funding towards the middle school building.
That would bring the total up to 110
110.
million.
Okay,
with-
that would be an authorization to borrow. So we don't know exactly how much we'll need to borrow yet. Okay, now we're ready for public comment, 5 minutes after our scheduled time. If you would like to make a public comment, please step forward to the table at the mic, state your name and address, and make your comment. We'll start with people in the room and then move to Zoom. I see those that on Zoom, if you use the raise hand feature, you would be considered to make a public comment. Anyone in the room would like to speak? Going once.
Hi, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to talk to you. My name is Victoria Klimkowitz. I'm a resident of Concord. I live on Nimrod Drive. I have raised some questions and concerns and requested additional information regarding the emergency shelter.
Yeah, I think we got your letter in
Yeah,
the packet.
it should be in the packet.
Yeah.
And I won't read my questions one by one. I thank you that some of them have been addressed on the frequently asked questions. I think some of them have not yet been addressed. The ones that I'm focused on, and I think that my neighbors and I would like clarity on, relate to public safety, resident safety, and also the safety of the shelter, the individuals staying at the shelter, with the proximity to Route 2. What kind of safety measures will be put in place to ensure that individuals aren't crossing Route 2? And, you know, there's a lot of traffic there. Also, another question I had was if Concord has any rules against, or what the rules are for individuals to, if there is going to be anybody looking to collect donations in and around the Rotary for collections. Sometimes you see that around shelters, if what those guidelines are going to be from a safety perspective. The other thing I wanted to ask related to the contract. So in the publication on our site, it says that the contract is with the DHCD. I've reached out to them asking for the bid and for the bid and the solicitation number for the contract. They have come back to me and said there is no bid and solicitation contract at this time. They said that they're still in conversation with a local nonprofit service provider who is connected with the owner on the lease discussions. So it sounded to me like right now, nothing has been signed, and that was from them today at 7 p.m. I finally received the replies. I've been going back and forth with them, trying to find out what the bid was, because it should be public, and how much they were going to be, you know, collecting the hotel from this. And it seems like that from her responses, this is from the responses of the director for contracts for the DHCD, that the actual leasee is not the state, it's a nonprofit organization. So that, which is contradictory to what was published on the Concord website. So around that, I was also
Could
wondering.
you forward that to us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
And then I was wondering if the town council has been engaged to review the zoning bylaws. When you think of based on my research, and I'm not in real estate, I'm not a lawyer at all, the limited use District 1 really is zoned for a hotel. Now, understanding that, you know, we can stretch that kind of zoning for a longer term use. Here we're saying initially we heard, you know, 2 to 5 days, then we heard, you know, 2 to 4 months, then we heard could potentially be that the contract there would go out to 2 years with the facility, not the people staying, but is it really a hotel if you can't book a room there in 2 years? Is that zoning like really being stretched in that case? And so is somebody from legal counsel looking into the definition of that zoning? Sorry, just from a school perspective, we'd like to understand, and we understand that this will be focused towards families, which is great to hear. Will those kids we heard they have a school choice, so wherever they were before, or if they could attend Concord schools, will those students all be attending the Willard School, or will they be attending other schools? Because that's in the Willard School zone. So that's another question that I think some of us had. When it comes to the building, I know you mentioned it still has to go through inspection. R2, you said, was for over 30 days, which doesn't seem like a quick intake, 2 to 5 days for a person to stay there. If we're checking the building zone for 30 days, I mean, that seems like longer than a temporary stay. And what would be the max capacity of the hotel of people staying there? I think that's another question that I had. I'm an immigrant. I came to the US. I lived in subsidized housing. What that did for my family, the location and the infrastructure that was put in place, it allowed my parents to get job training, healthcare, childcare for my brother and I, so that we could be set up successfully. My personal opinion, and what I've heard from a lot of my neighbors who are also may not want to stand up and talk to you, and they may not feel as comfortable as I do, is that this is not a great location even for a temporary stay for more than a day or two, especially for vulnerable women and children who might be pregnant, who need services. To literally bring somebody to let's say a 10 by 10 room on a highway surrounded by really nothing, and you're sitting in this hotel, and I'm sure all of have seen it. It's just, you're doing that's not helping somebody out. That's really just decreasing numbers. And if there was a public bid and there were other viable locations and options for people where they can have better access to services, then I would really like to see that, but I'm not sure. That's all I had to say. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate, I know that this was last minute for the town, for the people, but if you could continue to keep the residents updated as you're learning things and as you're, combing through and navigating this, it would be really helpful for us, especially for the neighborhood that borders that hotel area.
Thank you very much. Any other people who would like to make a public comment in the room?
I would love to make a public comment. Thank you for giving me the chance. My name is Victoria Weislowicz. I live on Nimrod Drive, and I share the same concerns as Victoria does. My concerns are related to the facility that is being established, and my concerns go to those people that are going to be moved there and cooped up in those rooms in complete isolation. We all know there is no infrastructure and there are no resources. I would like the town to be more engaged in this issue and try to understand what is that the state is providing for this facility and what is going to end up on town's shoulders. And are we as a town ready for this? I heard about the similar facility being established in Kingston, Massachusetts. I don't know if you are familiar with that. And I believe that the owner of Best Western and the owner of the hotel in Kingston is it's the same owner. And how do we make sure as a town that we are not just simply trying to help somebody's business to stay afloat by exploiting the family crisis? Because quite honestly, the facility that those people are going to end up with is by no means providing them the opportunities for jobs. There is no transportation, there is no food, there's nothing there for them. There's just residential, there is temple, there's gas station, and that's it. What are they gonna do? So I would like the town to address all these questions and
Also, on the part of the neighborhood, I'm very concerned that there is lack of transparency with this project and there is lack of communication that is there right now. And I think that creates fear and resentment in my neighborhood, that we don't have any plan and we don't know what the plans are and we are not being asked for any input on that. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments in the room? Yes, come state your name and address and perhaps your role in government.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Simon Cataldo, Hosmer Road, also the state representative for the 14th Middlesex District. I just wanted to very briefly address two topics that have been covered in today's meeting. First of all, with respect to Hanscom, I applaud the members of the Select Board and many members of our community for their rapid action in response to the planned expansion. You should know, the public should know, as Ms. Ackerman alluded to earlier, the state legislative delegation, not just for Concord, but also for Bedford and Lexington, is engaged on this matter. We are in close communication with one another. Senator Barrett in particular has deep institutional knowledge on this issue, and we are formulating strategies for what we can do as a legislative delegation. Of course, this matter, the agency over this matter is with the executive branch, not with the legislative branch, but we will do everything in our power. We're speaking about it frequently. I got off the phone with Senator Barrett about this issue right before I walked in here. So we'll do everything that we can. And again, I want to thank the Select Board and the many residents who have contacted me, but also who are engaged on this issue. With regard to the Best Western, like you all, I have received many questions and concerns concerning the suitability of this location, the timeliness of the information, the way that it was revealed by DHCD, and many, many other issues, some of which were referenced by the two previous speakers. I just think a few things are worth repeating here, and some of this is somewhat redundant with what the town manager said earlier, so I hope you'll excuse that. But this was not a town decision. It was not a state legislative decision. It was a administrative decision to enter an agreement through the on-site service agency to use the Best Western in this manner. Many residents have reached out concerning the entrenched members of our community here in Concord who have been staying at the Best Western for quite a while. I am in direct communication with many of those folks. Over the course of the last week, DHCD has reached an agreement, but the details of that are not final for those folks to stay. I am closely monitoring how that all gets ironed out to make sure that those folks are treated fairly. I know that many residents of the town know those people. They work here, they're engaged in civic life, and it's very, very important that they're able to stay as comfortably as possible, and it would be unacceptable for that not to occur. Otherwise, I want to thank the members of town leadership, the Select Board, the town staff for being so engaged, and also the superintendent and the school committee for being so engaged, for collecting the information we are able to collect about this developing situation as quickly as possible. I know that many residents have the concerns that were stated, not just about safety and issues and resources for the people who are here now, but also for the people who may be arriving. This is my first priority. I know that I'm not alone in that, and we are working on it. I'll be meeting shortly with MOC, the on-site services agency, to get a better understanding than we have now about what services are going to be provided, what may not be provided. I plan to visit Devon's, which has a similar site, to better understand what this looks like in practice. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg for my efforts. And I know there are many other efforts going on right now. Thank you so much for allowing me this time.
All right, thank you, Representative Cataldo.
Simon, there's one other issue I think that should be considered in this, and that is the impact on the economy of the local area in terms of absorbing a facility which is otherwise potentially something that is economically productive in terms of tourist traffic and housing visitors to the town who are more engaged in the social and economic and cultural life of the town than transients would be in this facility.
Mr. Chair, may I
Go ahead.
respond to that?
Yeah,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Mr. Dane, you're not the first person to have raised that issue. I think it speaks to the larger dynamic of what the state is going to do financially and otherwise to support the emerging resource needs that are presented by the use of the Best Western in this manner. I think it's relevant to that overall equation that there are many things that Concord wants from the state right now for this year and for the years to come. And the way that we conduct ourselves as a community, I think will matter in that overall equation. And so I know that, we have great leadership from the town. We have close communication right now. Maybe not, we may not be getting all the details we want, but there is communication. I've spoken multiple times with the Lieutenant Governor in recent days. I know others have as well, and we'll stay engaged and try to make sure, do everything we can to make sure that the administration is a good partner to the many needs that we have as a community, not just with respect to the Best Western.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else in the room that would like to make a public comment? All right, seeing none, I'll move to the Zoom. Yes.
Sorry, if I, it's very helpful to hear from the public and from our legislature. And I appreciate all the good questions that have been asked. They add to the many questions that we're already asking. And we just heard Representative Cataldo said that the way in which we conduct ourselves as a community is very important in this issue. And I want to caution everyone not to prematurely project stereotypes on individuals who need our support. And that's just one more piece of the equation. And I feel compelled to say that because I know that we have good people in Concord who also understand the needs of their fellow human beings.
Okay, so I'll move to Diane Proctor on the Zoom. Diane.
Thank you, Matt. I don't seem to be appearing. So can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. I can't see me. I don't know what's wrong. My computer must not be functioning perfectly. I'm Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road, and I'm speaking for the League of Women Voters Town Government Committee, which met this afternoon for several hours. And several ideas emerged based about the Hanscom base that I thought it would be wise to share. The first thing, however, is to thank you for the very good work that you've done tonight. And the efforts that Terry was at the meeting, Linda was at the meeting. I don't know if others were, but it was really helpful to have them on board asking questions. The first thing is that we would recommend that you follow the money and figure out who is behind this expansion, because it's not necessarily apparent. We'd like to emphasize the impact on children and the families who live in uncomfortable proximity to Hanscom, so that when you're talking about environmental concerns, the children are important, as particularly important as well. In our discussions, when we were online with NEPA, MEPA, Massachusetts Environmental Protection Agency, what became very clear is that they have absolutely no authority over this. And even if they find that the impact is deleterious, and so we write a nice and polite letter suggesting that it is, they have no authority to do anything but perhaps clear their throat and say, oh my goodness, this may not be the best thing to do, and they may not even be willing to do that. Therefore, we feel that I love your letter. I love the letter that Marcia and you all will edit. I mean, from the degree that we could see it from home. But I think that although that letter needs to be sent, and thank heavens you're doing it, that we really need to get to the governor. Because from all the research we have been able to entertain, the only person who could in any way significantly stop this endeavor is the governor herself. And I hope that you as select board members will ally with other select boards and bring to bear the authority and power you possess collectively to try to gain the attention of the governor so that this project cannot go forward. Thank you very much. As a kind of statement, it seems to us that this is a kind of a private privileged expansion at the expense of public good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Proctor. Next, it's
Tanya. Hi. Tanya Galis, 62 Prescott Road. I endorse what Diane just said, and please appeal to the governor directly, and I ask that of our representatives and senator as well. Thank you very much. I want to add here something I found out about the proponent of this Hanscom project, that they, even though they said they would share the video of that meeting with the public, they didn't. And MIPA is not taking a more active role in this either, in making sure the public can access the video afterwards. But thankfully, someone did download the transcript, so we do have the transcript of it. I'm saying this because it shows a little bit of lack of good faith on the part of the developer in addition to everything else. But please appeal to the governor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Katie Winchell, have you moved to Concord?
Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just don't know if you're a Concord resident.
I'm not a Concord resident. I work for Save Our Heritage at 91 Main Street.
Okay,
May I proceed? May I proceed?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. What I concur with everything that Diane prior to me and Tanya said. I think those are going to be the strongest ways to respond to this extensive development at Hanscom. At the same time, I would like to say something about the letter that that the select board will be sending to MIPA. It is true that MIPA is everything that Diane just described, and it's just, and also the way Marcia described it. They will not be able to stop it, but it does collect information, and it also extracts information from the proponents via our letters and our questions. And that sort of record is going to be important for future work outside of MIPA. We need that kind of paper trail from all the different agencies and stakeholders. And I just wanted to say regarding the letter in specific that I'd like to suggest that, except for your comment, Matt, to include further specificity about ferry flights, I'd like to encourage the select board to leave Marcia's memo/letter to MIPA as is, with all the existing queries for further information on the subjects she's laid out so well, because it's important to include these hard-pointed questions directed at issues that the developers ENF so blatantly tries to ignore in their effort to convince the public and MIPA that this extensive development plan for private jet travel will not have any adverse impacts. In fact, it's going to be great for the environment, and it will have no public health impacts. So it's very important that those points are retained. And despite the fact, this is going to your point, Matt, that they may just knock them down because their premise is there is no problem. Well, we need to challenge that premise, is what I'm saying.
All right, thank you. Next to Pamela Dritt.
Thank you. Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. Thank you for all the good work you're doing. But I do believe the open meeting laws require you to make all the letters sent to the select board accessible to the public, whether they came in on time or not. It doesn't really matter. Whether they are included in the packet or not doesn't really matter.
They're all public
Well,
records.
Yeah, well, as long as they're in the public records, like accessible to us online, I suggest like the zoning board of appeals does, or the planning board does. They post the letters they receive organized by the topics. And they don't have to include, they're not in all the packet materials, but we can't access them if we don't know they exist. And if they're online, then you don't have to add them to the packet, but we could also access them. I really appreciate your doing that.
Okay, thank you.
And because we got a lot of brilliant, accomplished, creative people in Concord, you know, yourselves included, of course. And if they don't know what's being talked about, then they can't contribute. And I think the example of Easterbrook Road is a good one. If all sides communication was posted publicly, then perhaps interested citizens might have facilitated a settlement that didn't require legal lawsuits. You never know.
Okay, next, Jerry Palucci.
Yes, hello. Thank you for recognizing me. I'm a Concord resident. I live over near Barrow Farm. I'd like to thank Diane, Tanya, Simon, and the two Victorias for their comments regarding both Hanscom and the Best Western. I really feel like the lack
Get
of
your
fit.
specific address for the record, please.
Oh yeah, 77 Star Lane.
Thank you.
Yep. I really feel like the lack of fit and the lack of notice on the Best Western deal are not coincidental. It really just feels like it just showed up and it's being railroaded through. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to stop this. I don't know if it could be stopped. It seems like a particularly ill fit for the people we're trying to help. I mean, no grocery store, no pharmacy, next to a highway, places without kitchens. I just don't understand why that spot was chosen. With regard to Hanscom, I don't see how adding 27 hangars, or however many it is not going to result in significantly more air traffic. Why do it if it's not? So I would like to stand up against that. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that's all of the public comment. Tanya, you had another comment?
Yes, I want to mention that since my name was just mentioned, I'm not really opposed to the Best Western project so much. I do care that the guests have all their needs met appropriately. So I support these concerns. But beyond that, I think it is nice to be able to help out people who need our support. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I believe then that takes us to the end of our agenda this evening.
Wait, it's not over, is it?
So I would like to adjourn the meeting at 9:50.
Move to adjourn.